Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Y'all are brewheads? Yeah, we brewheads. So pour a glass of craft beer, we can do this. Yeah.
What's good, y'all? This is C Certified Brewhead, and welcome to episode 9 of the Business of Beer here on BAOS podcast. Folks, this is a bit of a unprompted, sporadic emergency podcast. I'm out here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for about 6 weeks all up in our trip, which is interesting timing given everything that's happening. And I was talking to tonight's guest, and he suggested that we do an emergency pod because it's probably pretty important that we talk through all these things in detail. And I thought that was such a great idea because we can really get into what's happening between Canada and the US, which I imagine if you're watching or listening to this, you're pretty aware of everything that's going on. And for me, is horrendous timing because the day we got here was the day that all this shit went down. And yeah, it's, I'm going to be posting American beer for the next month and a bit. So didn't want people to be to think, what are you doing? It's just the timing was crazy. So we're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff. This is going to get like really specific, technical, and deep about it all. So I'm super excited for this. So this is one of the, I think now this is definitely the most guested person on the pod. So let me put this one here. I'm going to bring it back on. We got Shehan from Lost Craft in the building. That most guested, most appearances.
Nice.
Look at that. It's legendary, brother. Great to see you, man.
You as well. So you're saying that it's just coincidence about the American beers? It's not that you're just like showing respect to your new president?
to the new president of Canada, the 51st state. Yeah, look, imagine. The timing is so crazy, but I want to shout everybody out for not giving me shit. No one said anything. But to be fair, on the way down, we drove down because we've done this before and stayed for a long time. We need to escape the winter because it's a whole ordeal. But I had all these, like, Tiff took all these sick photos in, like, Philly and, like, Raleigh of some wicked breweries, like, really phenomenal world-class breweries. I was going to post them, and then this happened. And then I'm just going to sit on those photos for a little bit. And, sit tight. Just let it happen because I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. Thank God we had some Ontario podcasts.
The vlog is going to be light on content, unfortunately. You leaving and then you coming back.
Yeah, basically. That's the only way to do it. Thank God I've got a lot of I've got a lot of content and vlog content to edit. Like Tiff normally does it, but she doesn't have time, so I'm gonna have to do it. And I've got stuff backed up since like 2020, and I don't think there's like one of them's in Canada, or the rest is all here as well. So I don't even know. I'm just gonna do some pods for a bit, and we'll sit on it until things kind of chill out. But I'm really glad you reached out. We spoke the other night. We were in Jacksonville on the way down, and you ran all this stuff by me. I was like, you know what? You're right. We should do an emergency podcast that really breaks down everything and the implications on both sides of the border, what's happening, other types of tax stuff as well, because there's a few other different things, and just get into a few nuances about the size of the different industries and the tax thing that we have spoken about with you on here before. Actually, we spoke. When was that? Was that like
a year ago?
Was that really a year ago? I think you're right. I think it was like this time last year in 2024. Yeah. I don't know. Was it this series or was it a regular series? I don't know if we had this series back then. It's in the Business of Beer playlist on YouTube anyway. So you went into that. So we're going to go into some of those details, but it's going to be more focused on the other stuff. So we're going to be bumping all over the place tonight. We did not coordinate beers, obviously. I am drinking an American beer. This is my stout. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so my Wednesday is my big beer Wednesday. I don't know if I told you I ever do that, but it's my night to drink the big beers because I'm not going to do it otherwise. So I normally have a warm-up stout or a barley wine. This is my warm-up. It's an 8% barley wine from Burial. They're out of Asheville, North Carolina, but I picked this up in Raleigh. This is a donut skillet stout, like 8% sort of pastry stout. So I had this the other night. It's pretty dope. So I don't really go too much in detail. But these guys, this is my favorite American brewery right now. I love them a lot. Super cool. Got really like metal, like so crazy designs and shit. But let's focus more on what you're drinking, because you got a brand new Lost Craft beer that you're gonna be talking about.
Yeah, this is our new old school Pilsner, very 90s graffiti-esque. It'll be coming to the LCBO actually very soon.
Hell yeah. What's the deal with it? Is this a new SKU completely with the new product?
No, but we've rebranded it.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. I don't think I've had that one. The one that looked like the old style Pilsner.
No, it didn't.
It didn't? Oh,
No, it didn't.
no, it didn't at all. If anyone from the what's the office that handles cease and desist? Anyone there who's watching or listening, it didn't look anything like it whatsoever. It is a complete. It's not inspired by anything of the sorts. Tell us about the beer and when's that one dropping in the LCBO?
In a few months.
Months.
We had it around forever. Like we have it in a lot of kind of on-premise locations, kind of in Ontario.
Okay.
Nice light 4.2% Pilsner. It's super crushable. Nice easy drinking pills.
I love it, brother. Great to see you. We're gonna get into some shit. Cheers, my man.
Cheers.
Delish. All right. Where the fuck do we even start? That's the question. Where do we start? What's the thing that makes the most sense? Would it be to explain what's happening in the immediate time as far as the whole tariff situation seems to be is it fair to say the tariff situation is the inspiration for this?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so I think you're right. I think probably like a good quick overview, because I'm sure it's been dominating the news, right? I mean, probably not where you are. It's dominating the news
not as much. But in the beer world, it is. All the American beer folks are all talking about it just as much because from what I understand, and this is what we're going to get into, the American beer scene is arguably equally affected by all of this. It fucks them as much as it fucks Canada is from what I've been reading. I've actually got something that I'll read out afterwards that I got from someone in the craft beer scene who did a bit of a rant on Facebook about it that I thought was pretty good. So I'd read that out just to give a American perspective that is, funnily enough, when after we spoke, I saw that like the next day and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what Shehan told me, but from an American side. So they're just as pissed. They're very negatively affected by this whole thing as well. So maybe you want to start from the beginning. What's the deal? What's the tariff thing about? And why does it particularly affect the craft beer industry?
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious thing is, Trump has threatened like across the board tariffs to Canadian made products sold in America. Those tariffs are paid by the importers. So this has gone back and forth. I think a lot of people have talked about this, about who pays the tariff. It's not Canadians that pay, it's the Americans that pay. But then when prices go up for Canadian goods in America, there's less demand, and that kind of affects the entire kind of supply chain. It obviously, there's a lot of different industries. It's not just beer. Obviously, there's like, big ones like automotive, lumber, oil. There's huge industries that we have here. But so that was a threat tied to, illegal border crossings and fentanyl at the border. Obviously, the Canadian, perspective is that there really isn't as big a problem as there is on the southern border. Whether that's a good argument or not is kind of irrelevant at this point. But, essentially, we are where we are. So that's, the state of play for now. And then obviously once it came into effect, or when it was announced it was going to come into effect, Canada retaliates. Trade wars, if you talk to most economists, nobody wins. It's a road to nowhere, but
it feels that's like that.
That's kind of where it's at. And then like last minute deal was delayed for Trump delayed the implementation, and I guess Canada also reverted back, and we're sitting on a 30-day, we're within a 30-day window of kind of renegotiation on this whole trade tariff issue.
Okay. Thank you for breaking that down. So this was I don't really know much about this type of stuff like tariffs and, all of these sort of international trade things. So I've been kind of like learning about it since it started coming up. Like Trump was talking about it on podcasts last year, and without knowing anything about tariffs, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But you don't really think about what it really means for both the end users and then the businesses. So one example that I saw was a Canadian manufacturer of like ski equipment. They sell the vast majority of their stuff to American retailers. So they're essentially like a manufacturer, wholesaler, and they sell to America. So that would therefore, all of that ski equipment would have an additional 25%. So if it costs $100 to buy a pair of skis, which I'm sure it doesn't, but it'd be $125 wholesale. That 25% is not going to be eaten most likely by the wholesaler. It's going to be passed on to the end consumer because probably their margins aren't that big to be able to take 25%. So then they're going to be like, well, if the Canadian products that I was previously purchasing are going to be 25% more, I'm going to find a manufacturer elsewhere. That was one example that I heard last year before all this kerfuffle with Canada specifically. So I was like, okay, cool. And then now, like you said, Canada put a retaliatory one. So anything that is imported into Canada from America will therefore also be hit with a 25% tax. And that is specifically about goods. Is that correct? It's not services, it's goods only.
Yeah, I mean, it was specific. I don't actually know the full list. There was like a specific list and it was going to go up. And, so there was, I think, a bit of, they didn't, like, America was going to do it on everything, except they'll look a different rate on oil. And then Canada was going to retaliate with like a different, something slightly different. Interestingly, like, obviously, like, one of the things that made a lot of, hit a lot of headlines was because, Canada's run by a lot of provincial liquor boards. A lot of those liquor boards threatened to remove all American products because they could, versus in the US, it's all, a lot of it's privatized, obviously, so it's a little bit harder to do. Ironically, the only one that didn't, I think, do that was Alberta. So Alberta didn't remove any American products because they have a privatized model.
Oh, I thought it was because Danielle Smith went down and she had went to Mar-a-Lago and she had like a deal or something. Is that, or maybe not a deal, but
I'm just saying that the provinces that had provincial liquor boards removed or were threatening to remove American products.
Oh, because they're all private. Understood.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
Alberta didn't, because Alberta doesn't have like an LCBO. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. It's
yeah.
It's a little bit different. So
that makes complete sense.
Yeah. So, like, obviously the counter tariff thing in America, again, I they didn't threaten the same, like, we're going to pull all the Canadian products off and that's what I'm saying. It's just a little bit of a difference in terms of some of the implications were.
Understood. So because they didn't take Canadian products off the shelf here, could that be taken as more of like an aggressive action from the Canadian side, particularly from the LCBO, because they're the biggest purchaser of alcohol on the entire planet? Like, it's not a small move. I would have almost liked to be there to go in on Saturday or whatever when it happened. Or Sunday.
Well, it never happened.
I thought they pulled it.
No, it never actually happened because it was going to happen, I think. And
but
then
it delayed. Didn't they delayed it on Monday, but it was announced on Saturday. Saturday was February the 1st. Monday was the 3rd, and that was the day it was supposed to happen, but that's when they pulled it back.
It was supposed to happen on the 4th.
Or postponed it.
Yeah. It was supposed to happen on the 4th.
I get you.
Tuesday, and then it got off on the Monday. So anyway, I mean, it's a lot of talk. I mean, everyone talk, it's politics and whatever, right? There's a lot of talk about what's going to happen, but in the end, it didn't happen. So, like, I would just leave it as it didn't happen. And obviously, like, there's a lot of bigger, I don't know this specifically, but if I had to guess, there's a lot more American alcohol sold in Canada versus the other way around, just by the largest, biggest brands. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Understood. All right. So that's really where it's at. We're currently at a 30-day postponement because Trudeau agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border to take care of the fentanyl thing, which was one of the problems that America had. And they had the same issue with Mexico, and they also agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border. There was they did like a fentanyl czar, I believe is what they called it, which was also someone to really look out. How'd you go? Any heard back at all?
It seems like a pretty important job. So
yeah, okay. Look, if anyone's gonna beat the fentanyl czar, it's definitely Shehan de Silva of Last Cross. Okay, and then there was something else that they agreed to do or whatever to kind of calm things down, and then we'll see what happens. So obviously, what happens next is anyone's guess, from what I imagine. So as far as like so now we've like broken that down. That's the main thing. The main concern, this is what I got, and maybe I'll ask you this and I'll speak for a second. Then a lot of, and I know this because of you, I was talking to Tiff about it. You told me, I want to say a year and a half ago, that there was this aluminium, like most of the cans come from the States. Is that correct, most of the aluminium manufacturing of the cans. So there was some sort of like shortage of aluminium during COVID because everyone was wanting packaged goods. And then you were like, fuck, like, what do? We need to get this. We need to get aluminium so we can have packaged goods, packaged product. And that was already serving a bit of an issue just because of a shortage, because of a higher demand. So aluminium is going to come in. So if Canadian breweries, I'm just going to say everything I know, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or if I've got it right. If Canadian breweries are importing the cans from the States, then those cans are going to cost 25% more. The other huge one, from what I understand, is hops for breweries specifically. Like you touched on earlier, aside from the New Zealand hops, Australian hops, you got the European hops for the more noble stuff. But the majority, I would argue, of hops that are used by breweries across, whether it's Canada, America, Australia, etc., of the New World beers are from Pacific Northwest in the States, like Washington, Oregon, Idaho, etc. So that would be another 25%. I've been told, I had a call because we've got our 10th anniversary coming up, and I asked the brewery, which I can also ask you as well directly. I was like, "Yo, how does this affect you?" And they were like, "Well, thankfully, we've already got a bunch of contracts on hops, and we have contracts on cans, so that sort of saved us a little bit. But once those contracts end, or if that distributor chooses to break those contracts and be like, well, fuck you, here's 25% more on top of that, hops are already sometimes untenable for, big IPAs. Like, it's going to put a lot of pressure on breweries who are also already facing a lot of pressure, market pressure, economic pressure. People aren't drinking as much, etc. Any thoughts on all of that? Am I on point? Am I off a little bit? And then second question follow up would be, how is it directly affecting Lost Craft, at least before the postponement? What were you concerned about the most?
I think for sure your point on hops is correct. Obviously, for hops that are, it's not necessarily hops that are grown, right? It's hops that are imported. So if you're using like a U.S. importer, right? Like if it's coming from the U.S., it's going to get that tariff. Well, assuming that the Canadian government retaliated, because I remember like 25%, whatever the U.S. says is what the U.S. pays. It's not what Canadians pay. So if the U.S. says 25% tariff, that's what they pay on our goods.
Right. So they're from buying Canadian goods in America.
Correct.
And importing them in. Okay.
Correct. And then it's the counter is true for us. If our government puts in tariffs of 25%, I'm just giving you that number, simple math, then we would be paying 25%. So the biggest thing that I was concerned about, which I think was actually on the initial list, was cans. Because like leading into now is a time that we're like buying a lot of our loading up for spring, summer, heavy selling season. So yeah, like it would be a significant hit to be paying 25% more for cans. So that was 100% my biggest concern. And again, hops is a little bit tricky because hops affects different beers in different ways, right? Like lagers generally are going to be lightly hopped, so the cost inflation is somewhat minimal. Maybe. Gotcha. Yeah, but obviously like heavy IPAs with a ton of American hops, if you don't have contracts, obviously that would, if those are taxed that way, then that would potentially have a big cost increase, or that would affect cost for sure. And contracts, the thing is, like, even if you have contracts, if a hop provider, like, there isn't necessarily a ton of margin in those products, right? So if a hop provider all of a sudden signed a contract and now every time he brings in that product is paying 25% more, their options are going to be break the contract or go out of business, right? Like they can't just keep losing money on a contract. So
can I ask a follow-up question quick on that? The way you just phrased that was interesting. So if Lost Craft has a contract with Yakima Chief Hops in Oregon there, and you've already got it all sorted out for 2025, you're already good. But those hops are currently in America that you've already got a contract for and that you've already partially paid for. If Yakima Chief imports it into Canada after Canada puts a tariff on American products, even though you've signed a contract 2 years ago for those hops, does that mean that they could still be potentially hit on Yakima's side, or the importer, whoever it is? Maybe
it's the importer. You gotta, it's exactly that. It's the contract, the contracts between company A and company B. But when that product crosses the border, someone's paying 25%, and it's usually the importer.
So even if it's already the contract, like as in you've already got the deal, it's just like it's over and above the deal. Like the deal's the deal, and like that's one thing. But the government could be like, yeah, well, this tariff exists now, so you're paying.
Yeah, well, usually
someone's paying.
Yeah, well, usually you're working through a broker, right? So Canadian company is the broker, and they're importing the hops and then selling you the hops. So technically, as long as that's that intermediary person that would be paying for it, unless you have the contract directly. And if you have the contract directly, then yeah, you're paying for it.
Fuck. Okay. Because Yakima Chief, I'm using them as an example because I'm relatively familiar with them. I know they got an American headquarters, but I know they've got Canadian-based reps. Like Luke everyone knows Luke Beaulieu from Quebec. So he's the Quebec dude. There's a dude I haven't met named Alex, who's the Ontario guy now. They both work for Yakima, but their headquarters, they've got massive warehouses in Quebec and in Ontario and stuff like that where they keep the stuff. So if they've already imported, maybe if they're smart, they would import the hops like once the contracts are signed or once the hops are done, and they'll just store them in Canada so they can get them to the brewery, because the breweries probably don't have the space to keep that volume of hops, for a whole year type shit. So I imagine they just take it, they get them shipped out as they need to. But if those hops are still in the States before after the tariffs come in, then they're going to pay tough shit. Someone's going to pay, whether that is the Canadian Yakima Chief or the brewery has it directly with the agreement with the American Yakima Chief, and then the brewery would just have to pay. There's just it's almost like a customs charge. All that shit when you get you order something off UPS and then you get that bullshit charge if it's over a certain amount type of thing from the customs type.
So that's correct. And that's why the Canadian government was they were hesitant. If they just did the same thing that Trump did, it would hurt us. It hurts it hurts Canadian companies, right? Because whatever we buy is going to become more expensive now. And whereas what Trump was doing is whatever the Americans buy is going to become more. So it makes the problem worse effectively, right? But that's what a trade war is. It spirals out of control. So it just depends on what our government would respond to. And actually, one thing that I would do is obviously the big sentiment in Canada right now is everyone's pissed and pissed at Americans pissed at the American government. I don't want to necessarily call it all Americans for sure. So,
I think Americans are apologetic about it. Americans are really sad about it. Yeah. Because they're getting fucked too. Regular everyday Americans are going to get fucked by this big time.
Yeah, and I'll give you my at a very, because it's been beaten down in the news, but I'd say this is my overall overarching perspective of why what Trump did was so sinister, and why I think it's what makes me furious about the whole situation. It's
Can I just pause you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I got some breaking news. Irv Gotti died.
Wow.
Wow.
Murdered?
It just says he has passed away from a stroke at 54 years old. So people don't know. Sorry, guys. It's just because you're a hip hop dude, so I know you'd appreciate that. He's a label owner of a label called Murder Inc., which was Ja Rule, Ashanti, Lloyd, things like that. And he worked with Jay-Z in the beginning and stuff. Damn, that's fucking cool. Honestly, that's... Tiff just sent it via email. I just saw the notification. I normally don't check it while we're talking, but I'm just oh my God. So that's huge. That's crazy.
Wow.
Because he was just on Drink Champs recently and stuff, working on stuff. That's 54 is very young. Sorry to cut you off, brother. I just wanted to make, because I knew you would actually want to know that too. Continue. Sorry.
No, what if you break this down at a very high level, what I think is really messed up about the whole situation, America, Canada, Mexico, especially America, Canada, going through an exceptionally long period of time, have had this free trade agreement. It was and when that agreement started, it was very clear, America was bigger than Canada, better together. There's a lot of proponents of the details and the economics behind it, but effectively America, let's call them the bigger brother, agreed to this agreement where we're going to create an environment where Canada and the US are going to trade a lot.
Is that NAFTA?
And that's NAFTA. There was a free trade. I think that was NAFTA. Before there was there's all these different elements of free trade between Canada and America.
Gotcha.
And and obviously Canada being, a smaller country, and with our neighbors being the biggest country in the world, or sorry, having the biggest economy in the world for a long period of time, obviously, like, why would if we have a friendly neighbor that's allowing us to do free trade, why would we look to, other markets when all we need to do is trade with our neighbor? It's the easiest thing, right? Now, maybe we should have been focusing on that, but like the rules of engagement were set. We're friends. We fight wars together. We do, we have these agreements together. And so we're going to really like link our economy to their economy and our country to their country. I mean, and it was a respected kind of, it was a respected kind of situation on both sides of the border for the longest period of time. So over time, obviously, what happens is Canada, because the US is bigger, becomes more reliant on the US. And what Trump did was, knowing that like our exports to them as a percentage is way higher, like they don't care. Like it won't affect America, these tariffs, but it will affect Canada. So knowing that, and again, there's a whole bunch of history as to how this kind of happened. He just flipped it on a dime and laid out major threats to tank the Canadian economy, and then is musing about the 51st state annexing Canada, saying that he doesn't need the trade anymore, and we're relying on the U.S., so we should just be taken over by the U.S. But the sinister aspect of that is it was almost like a trap, right? It's like the successful governments like kind of lured Canada in to like work with us. And then you get a president and a lot of his supporters, right? A lot of senators and I don't know what, Congress people and all this stuff, they're now supporting this. Like, no, I mean, again, they're not saying, invade Canada, but they're saying, yeah, like they're relying on us. Yeah, maybe it makes sense. Like it was a very slick way to screw over like when I say a best, I hate this term because all the politics, the best friend, like it was just a very, very close relationship that they kind of encouraged and then flipped it on a dime to threaten Canada. And that is like that's some sick shit. And that, I mean, to me anyway, like it's just not like you can't be the beacon of freedom and like just have this idea that you're the shining star of the world when you're really just snaky, like real snaky. And this is, to me, at least from my perspective, that's like the history behind why I'm pissed. And then obviously like the disrespect is even extra why I'm pissed. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm pissed. But I agree, like it's hard because you have to separate the American people from the American president, and
big time.
And then you get
we should say that up front very aggressively. We are all love to American people. This is just the government's fighting. Honestly, here in Fort Lauderdale, like everyone is so insanely nice, and the joke was like most people here are from Canada anyway, because like we were a bit late for the pod. Luckily, you pushed it a bit. We met our neighbors next door in this apartment complex, and they're from Montreal, so I was having a nice chat with them. They're lovely, and they were telling us how nice everyone is here, and I just feel like Americans, I was like, nobody wants this. Canadians and Americans we're very similar people. We're very like. Nobody wants the smoke. No one wants the drama. It's like it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So I'm glad you laid it out like that.
And I mean, I think, look, it's not perfect, and I think that there are some certain things that I think our government had done, but I don't think it's this government or the government before. Like it's been a consistent thing. Like we haven't spent enough money on defense, and they can point like it's not just Trump that said that. Other president, we're not perfect. I guess I'm also saying like. Some of his grievances, I think, are potentially fair, but it's just the way to do that is I can't use like sinister is the word to me. It's not. It's a real messed up way to kind of go about dealing with your neighboring country. Very
the largest bizarre. Undefended land border in the world, from what I understand. Yeah, I look. I'm politically homeless, and so I hate everybody. So it's like I'm saying this from a position of like I don't have any alliances. I was sort of like I thought he was just bluffing because a lot of the things that he says, he's just like I was like he's full of shit. He's just saying it, and he's like a populist. So if people get mad, he'll change his mind to appeal to people. That's what he's been doing. That's what he did last time. And this was so preposterous to me that someone would do this to Canada that I'm just like. I was like, all right, well, I guess not. Like, but it could be to me, I thought it was a bit of dick swinging too, because all it took was maybe it was his way to get what he wanted. And he pushed, and then Trudeau gave him whatever he wanted. Apparently, Tiff was telling me that Trudeau offered this last year and he didn't accept it. And now he offered the same thing again and he accepted it. So whatever, probably more dick swinging or bullying, whatever you want to call it. And he added more stuff. Okay, Tiff's saying she's here across the room. She said he added more stuff. So cool. He got what he wanted, right? Sweet. But it seems like a net negative. But one of the positive, because we've been talking, because this was happening on the drive down, and I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening. It's so crazy. I'm like, we're here, we're driving all the way down here for an extended period. I'm like, fucking hell. Not that I was worried about anything, but just like right now, I was thinking that like I saw the response online. The response was aggressively like buy local, support Canadian. And it's almost like the side effect is to be like, all right, that's how it is. Cool, bro. Well, fuck you then. Well, you know what? We have Canadian whiskey. We have Canadian rye. We have an incredible Canadian craft beer scene, incredible Canadian wine scene. The food here is like second to none. We have here in America, there's so much, corn, high fructose corn syrups and basically tap water at this point. Like, everything we have in Canada is phenomenal. We have all the things that we need. So, is this potentially a net positive because it's getting people, regardless if the tariffs happen or not? Do you think it could be you kind of touched on it earlier that it didn't last, but do you think maybe it could last this time and make people a little more proud and not go back? Because we don't grow oranges really in Canada unless people start a whole bunch of greenhouses. So I don't know where y'all are getting your orange juice from. But
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, could this be a positive in the long run? Yeah,
well, I mean, there's like two sides to that. I'll start with what I think his big miscal. And again, here's the one thing that I will say: if his real objective is take over Canada, it would have been a lot better to have been for him to be straight up front, like this is what I'm going to do. And obviously we don't have the military to there's not, if the tanks roll in, I don't think that there's much that we can really do, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think he could have been more clear, because I think the biggest problem too with what he's done is it's confusing to understand what he wants, right? If he had said, do this at the border, I want this, and this, and most likely, as long as it's reasonable, I think the Canadian government would have said yes. But he didn't say that. It's like, just strengthen the border. So it's this weird dog and pony show. Yeah, it's very vague, where you're like, I don't even understand what you want. Just be straight up and tell me, tell us what you want. But whether it was that, and then obviously a lot of Canadians just view this whole thing, I think, about the fentanyl, not really, like a small percentage of the fentanyl coming in, a small percentage of illegal immigrants coming in from the northern border. They view that as unfair. But I think that, which there's strong merit for. But I think that it just went on hyperdrive when he started musing about, we're not a real country, we're relying on them. And then that's when he started really piling it on, right? 51st state, insulting the prime minister, like going on. And now you're really attacking the identity of Canadians, which is obviously going to piss people off pretty significantly. And the byproduct of that was this, all right, fuck you, we're going to pull products, we're not going to support American stuff. And the unfortunate thing, and again, it goes back to I have no beef with the American people, unless the American people are really gunning to come invade Canada or destroy the Canadian economy. Two similar things, in different done in a different way. Because really what he did was declare economic warfare on Canada. He wanted Canadians to lose jobs, us to fall into a recession, rack up debt. Like, this is, this is the playbook when you're trying to attack a country with economics versus the military. This is what you do, and this is what Trump did. And again, did it in this snaky way because it was Canada. It'd be different if it was Russia, ironically, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a different dynamic.
Right.
But but so yeah, so the byproduct of this whole thing is a real backlash on American goods and American brands, and the time will tell this, but you know, I suspect that there's going to be a real hangover for Buy American in Canada. Whether this goes on, whether it happens, whether it doesn't happen, like people that I know that just won't buy American products, won't travel to America anymore. Like, you know, I don't think this is permanent, but it's a 2025 thing, you know, and potentially for a significant period of time. Like, you don't need to, like, the thing is, American products a lot of the time are things that you don't necessarily need. Like, you know, you don't need to buy Coors Light. I mean, and Coors Light's actually technically Canadian produced, I think, but I'm using that as an American brand example. You know what I mean? But like, you do a lot of the American brands, there's a similar Canadian, you know, product that you can get for the most part. Not everything, but for the most part, right? So
ain't no Trader Joe's in Canada.
yeah,
TJ's is the goat. I know what you're saying. You are right.
Yeah. So like, I mean, especially because there's a lot of the difference, and this is the stupidity of the whole thing, right? The difference is a lot of the time what Canada is shipping to the US, case in point, is aluminum. So we ship raw aluminum to the US. They have these like massive factories. They value add that aluminum into cans and then sell it back to us, right? That's the flow that's like the flow, right? So if you think about it, so then America tariffs us by 25% on the aluminum that goes out, and then we tariff them back 25% on the aluminum that comes back to us. It's this crazy cycle of like
what's
inflation.
The point?
Hurting
People.
It hurts everyone, exactly. And then obviously the demand goes down, and there's really good Ronald Reagan they're not podcasts. There's a lot of good Ronald Reagan videos where he talks about the implications of trade wars and tariffs and why they're bad. And again, I don't want to get into all the economics. I think there are, in some instances, reasons why people do tariffs that may have objectives, but generally speaking, trade wars, nobody wins a trade war. And generally speaking, you certainly don't do that with your closest ally and neighbor unless something crazy is happening. And certainly this was not, you know, Trudeau didn't declare war on America. Like, this is not, you know, there's nothing that really would credibly warrant, you know, this action. Yeah. Okay. And I mean, the Wall Street Journal called it the dumbest trade war in history. Like, you know, smarter people than me have kind of opined on this. And, you know, I don't think that it's going to history will not look well on this, I think, for Mr. Trump, president.
I couldn't agree more. What do you think his ultimate goal is then? Like, if he's doing this and both sides, like at the end, and look, the America first and Canada first inherently isn't a bad thing. Like, keep jobs in Canada, keep jobs in America, right? I totally get that. And I'm like, I understand that that's what we want, right? Because we keep, you know, everything, a lot of things are offshore, but that's, you know, not keeping the jobs here. We want to keep the money circulating into small businesses. Obviously, COVID fucking decimated small businesses. And we got to be honest, the government fucked everybody when they let Walmart open, but they wouldn't let the mom and pop shops open. That was disgusting. Like, this is the thing that almost like pisses me off about. You see the government now, they're all like, yeah, buy Canada, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, fuck you. Look what you did during COVID, you pricks. Like, you let all the big box stores open, but you wouldn't let them. And now every main street has newspaper in half the fucking stores on the windows because y'all did this. So it seemed very hypocritical to me that they did this bullshit. Either way, I don't want to get too started on it because I'm very opinionated and we don't really do that too much here on the pod. But like, what do you think Trump's ultimate goal is by doing this? Like you said, it wasn't like Trudeau or anyone in Canada did something to piss them off. He just came into office, guns blazing. I get it. That's his style. Cool. You like it. You love it, obviously, or hate it. You know, the people spoke. That's what they wanted. They wanted to change. Cool. It's usually how it goes. Wings left to right. Nobody ever wants to go in the center. It's just one extreme to another extreme. And what do you think he wants? What do you think the goal of this is?
I think it's one of, if I had to guess, it's one of two things. It's option A, which is hopefully the better option, is that they're renegotiating that trade agreement, the MCA or the free trade agreement, essentially for with Mexico and Canada. So this probably is a way assuming that he pauses it until that agreement expires again, which I would, knock on wood, hope that happens. My expectation is that this is kind of like an opening shot to say, we're not negotiating. We're just going to tell you what we want and you're going to do it. Right. Okay. I mean, I think it's a negotiating tool for that agreement. Okay. That's, and his stick is he could, because again, how he did this without going through Congress, right, was he called it a national emergency. So he kind of went around the system to do what he did. So, he could do it again. And the new emergency is, maple syrup is poison, and it's crossing the border in Canada. I don't know, he'll he can easily make up something. It doesn't matter at that point. Right. So I think it's like either negotiation for the MCA or it's sinister, or it is, he thinks Canada would be better under American control. He wants the Arctic North and he wants to threaten economic devastation to Canada. And the alternative would be, he takes it over and we're like the new Puerto Rico for America, right? Like, I mean, that's, yeah, because I don't know. I mean, not many people, again, smarter people than me have been talking about this for a long time and nobody seems to know what he's actually angling for. But by logic, to me, those would be two things. But again, like I said, in the option A scenario, he really did major damage to Canada-US relations. That's going to be lasting, I think. It's made all of our politicians say, hey, we need to stop trading with America. We need to trade more with ourselves. We need to trade more with other countries, right? And reduce that reliance on America, which, again, from an American interest perspective, isn't necessarily that good because they can't do, like, if we do that over time, they're not going to be able to do this to us again, right? So, or there's going to be less of an impact of them doing this with us again if now they're not a big trading partner to Canada. So it goes back to, I don't know. As I said, I think, from my perspective, when you understand a bit of the history and what he did and how he did it and what he's saying now, it does seem pretty, it's insulting. It's I think underhanded. It's just, again, it's like, if you're a prime, and I think I'll give credit to politicians where, a lot of the time, I think most Canadians would just give them a finger and just say, I'm not having this conversation, right? To be able to stay calm and negotiate for a country is exceptionally hard, right? Especially in stressful circumstances like this. So kudos to whoever is dealing with this stuff, whether they're like the politicians we elect or the people that are behind the scenes. But, certainly I think that the big miscalculation here is that the people are angry and they're very angry across the board.
Across the board.
I don't think Americans are angry. I think Canadians are really angry.
I think Americans are sad. We have multiple American clients and Tiff's on the calls with them. And I've heard them say to her, hey, like she get on the call, hey, how you doing? And before, hey, I just want to say, I want to apologize from as an American. I'm so sorry. Like, we love you guys. Like, they're very sweet and they're very like, what is happening? I feel like the closest, arguably Australia and New Zealand, very close like that, and Canada, America are very close like that. You could probably also argue like England, Ireland / Scotland, etc. Like, there's a few countries, I can't really speak to every part of the world, but there's a bunch of countries that have these relationships, and I feel like this is not reflective of anything that anybody is aspiring to have in the future. Nobody wants strained relations. It's silly, and everything was working, like you said. I think you nailed it earlier. You were like, it's not perfect. It's definitely got its flaws, but this wasn't the way forward. And I reckon that even the people who voted for him would also not be happy with this. I think that, like, yes, because Tiff was like, well, he fucking said it. I'm like, yeah, but I thought he was bluffing. I didn't, obviously, I'm not American. I didn't vote, but I don't think anyone thought that this was going to be the outcome. I really don't think anyone realistic would be like, yeah, we're going to fuck have a trade war with Canada, bro. We're going to fuck, this, it's so crazy. So with all of that said, thank you so much for giving that context, because it's like, as someone who's not from here, like, I don't have that historical understanding of it all, and I've been sort of trying to pick it up along the way. So to bring it back to craft beer a little bit, I think really what we're trying to talk about here is the impact on Canadian, I guess, we're a Canadian podcast. We do obviously speak to a lot of American breweries here as well, but I guess really to sort of speak to that impact on on the industry. And you know, for these business of beer episodes, I think we've said it before, but we put together these documents with all of these with the amount of information that is for us to tie to. And Shehan, you gave us a whole bunch of fucking really helpful shit in here that we can refer to. Where should we go from here to start to dive in a little bit more about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have some info on like the American perspective of how it changes, like the impact. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty straightforward. On both sides, costs go up, and by virtue, prices go up, right? I mean, that's ultimately the net effect of a trade war with a trading country. And I think the difference is like, you know, it from the American or the Canadian perspective, or who's bringing in what. I mean, that's really the question. And then how does that impact your supply chain?
Right. So then where should we go from here? Should we talk? So basically we have a whole bunch of different information here. You know what? I really think that right now, so basically, I don't know if I said this on air before, but we spoke on Friday night, I think it was, when we were in Jacksonville, and it's like either that night or the next day I saw the status on Facebook. Excuse me, shouts to Aaron Gore, who is a gentleman who I know from, I think he's from Indiana, but I knew he lived in Charlotte at the time. He's an American craft beer dude. I've had him on the pod before, and he shares a lot of great craft beer stuff on his Facebook, just on his personal Facebook. It's become like a really great news source, even though half of it's fucking blocked in Canada, but that's a whole other conversation. There was one status that he shared by a gentleman that is an American in the craft beer industry. And what I might do, because you've really given us such a fantastic overview of what's happening in Canada. I think maybe the next step would just be to quickly read this out to give a bit of context from the American side to show that Americans are equally as upset and as essentially like sort of terrified about the potential of what this means for them there. So you really pointed this out, and I feel like this might just really play into what you said. Then we can go into some of the other stuff from there. So I forgot this dude's name. I could find it. But he basically said, let me be crystal clear. These Trump tariffs will be an absolute disaster for the beer industry. It doesn't matter if you voted for him or not. This is a fact. All of these costs will be passed on to you. You won't pay $20 for a beer, so businesses will close. We're already receiving communication from many suppliers that saying increases are coming. So he's got business impact. First section is malted barley. All craft brewers source malt from a handful of suppliers. Of these suppliers, Canadian malt is a huge share of the pie. U.S. malt growers cannot scale up to fill that void. Is that something that you're aware of too? That really,
Canadians, we do a lot of malt, and I'm sure I don't know all the statistics about it, but that's the whole point, right? When you do a supply chain shock like this, eventually U.S. producers may be able to produce more,
right?
But
not quickly. Malt takes
quickly, depending on the industry, exactly. Like it'll take
hops too, years.
Yeah, it could take a couple of months. It could take 5 years. Like if you need to build a factory, right? You can't do that overnight. That's a big, and it's a big investment, right? It's
not even to mention the malting. I was just thinking about the raw materials, but you're right. The factory, the malting facilities.
Exactly.
Fuck, yeah, that's such a good point. His next section was fruits/processed fruits. Brewers source their fruit from suppliers who import from warm weather climates. We don't have the climates needed to grow most tropical fruits, and therefore can't replace this supply within the US. That's interesting because I would have thought they did. So your fruited sour or even your morning smoothie, all more expensive. Thoughts on that? Because I would have thought that the US, because obviously the whole bottom half is pretty warm. I know here in Florida, they do a lot of oranges and stuff like that, avocados, a lot of other tropical fruits.
Again, it goes back to like when you have an integrated supply chain, you rely on country, like you may be able to produce X amount, but to redo your, like, again, it's farming, right? Like it goes back to time. Eventually, maybe you can do it, but in the short term, no. Right? Like, so in the short term, there's going to be a price effect.
And a more demand than supply, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. This is what you were talking about. Cans. Cans are made from can sheet, which I've never heard of, which is made from aluminium, or as you say, aluminum, which is wrong. It's aluminium, you bitch. Canada is one of the largest exporters of aluminium to the US. I didn't know that. China. Did you know that?
Aluminum,
So we
yeah.
send the aluminium to US, they make the cans, and then we buy it back.
Yeah. I mean, that's another topic that we could probably discuss as to we should maybe reconsider that even absent anything. But yes, that is factually correct.
That is insane, dude. Okay, cool. I think that we should touch on that. China also exports aluminium to the US. A few years ago, brewers had to scramble to cover Trump's first Chinese aluminium tariff. Is that what happened during COVID, or was that a separate thing?
During COVID, it was the demand.
It was just
The
demand.
factories couldn't keep up. Yeah, exactly.
So the tariff had
yeah.
understood. Okay, the U.S. industry has increased production since, but not to the scale needed. Okay, oil and gas. This is another one that's probably just as bonkers as the last part. Canadian oil is exported primarily to the U.S. Gas prices will go up. This means freight will go up. Freight is shipping. This is already a massive cost for brewers, and that cost will be passed on. So that's another thing. I know the oil and gas, I don't want to fucking get too deep in oil and gas on the beer podcast, but Canadian oil gets sent over here to be processed because refined, right?
Refined.
Why do we do that and not do that locally? Do we not have the ability? Or is that the pipeline thing that I've heard Pierre talk about, that they won't send it out to St. John and then...
Yeah, we don't have the refining capacity, as I understand. I'm not in the oil industry too deep, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, yeah, it's I don't think Canada has the refining capacity, and America does have the refining capacity. So we just pipeline
sell them the raw. So okay, so I've heard Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the Conservative Party, he was saying that like the reason the Libs stopped, and once again, we're not getting politics, just trying to go facts about who said what, who did what. Had blocked bills, probably under environmental causes, I would imagine, of piping the oil or whatever, the raw gas, or gas meaning petroleum, to St. John. I don't know if that's St. John, New Brunswick or Newfoundland. I'm not sure. Probably New Brunswick, I guess, to be refined out there, but they didn't pass that. So therefore, we just keep selling it at a discounted rate, which is something else I heard, to the US. So we are losing money on our own natural resources, which is what Australia does. Sold all the fucking mines off to China and stuff. So China owns most of Australia because they keep selling stuff off.
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit complicated about who owns what, like in terms of countries and companies. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's, over the last like decade or longer, there's been a real push. I think Alberta has talked about this a lot, where like a lot of the other Canadian provinces have, and the federal government, I think, has made it very difficult to expand oil and gas pipelines in transmission and other projects east-west. So we're not self-sufficient. Like, as I understand it, generally speaking, we basically send, we'll send oil to America, and they may send it back to us in the form of gas, or we have some refinery capacity, but not enough to cover. Again, I'm not super clear, but what's for sure is other provinces have blocked and been difficult to get oil to east-west across Canada. That's certainly a fact. A lot of projects have been canceled, and that's what Alberta's upset about. And obviously, there's climate change, and I'm clearly not a climate denier or climate change denier, but I think that some of the arguments, Alberta has, I think, are quite valid in that. Okay. Yeah, they've been blocked from growing their economy, and in the guise of climate. But there's interesting debates, and I think one thing that she said that's actually quite valid is, one thing would be, is it not better for us to sell clean natural gas to India so they can stop relying on coal plants? So yeah, our emissions are going to go up, but globally they'll go down a lot because now India can start using cleaner energy.
Right. And India and China are some of the biggest polluters because they're not even trying to cut down.
Exactly. Right. So like, that's like one really strong argument that I think that could say like, hey, we should have done this a lot faster. And then the other argument would be, on the other side of the country would be, we should have done pipelines to the other side so we could ship to Europe. And part of that logic, would have been, Germany's had this issue where they're like reliant on, Russian natural gas. Unstable country, right? Lack of stability, security risk for the globe, et cetera, et cetera. So wouldn't it be nice to have, energy from a reliable, Western, stable, zero conflict type country like Canada? Probably.
Yes.
Right. So like these are, it's a little bit complicated, but I think Canada obviously like leaned in towards really limiting that, extraction energy access. And remember oil sands and all the negative press. I mean, it was in the media a lot, but and it goes back to the environment matters when, people are eating and jobs are there and everything's great. And then as soon as, if Trump puts, Canada into a depression, that's going to fall to the bottom of the priority list pretty soon, and most likely would be my guess.
That's a good point. I actually heard, I don't know, once again, I don't want to get into it either, really, but I've heard that Canada has the most boreal forest in the world, and that forest negates any CO2 output, essentially. Like it's essentially net zero just because of the sheer volume that we have, and we're doing all this carbon tax and all this other stuff, whereas these other countries like India and China aren't even trying and just polluting the world, and it's sort of, we're stressing over essentially what for the most part balances out, where these other countries. Now you mentioned, I'd never heard that before, by the way, that if we ship that off, then we can actually help in a larger scale clean everything up. I'm sure people have a lot of opinions on that, so totally don't want to get too deep.
Again, like I'm sure that there's an argument on the other side of that, but at a high level,
there always is. Yeah, I don't know enough to argue about it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. But I think at the end of the day, point being, we're in a situation where we're selling to the Americans and the tariffs are there and costs are going to go up, gas, transportation. And again, if we retaliate, it'll happen on our side too. So it just depends. But your can example is the perfect example of what Canada traditionally will do is ship raw materials to America, and they send them back to us much more expensive than we sent it to them through factories and innovations and manufacturing processes. So
why
in certain that, well, and again because again it goes back to like the integration of the supply chain. So I think look, we got to talk about beer a little bit more too. Yeah. So I don't want to. I feel like this is like economics driven, but effectively, if you just forget about the country border and you say like Canada, America, and Mexico are all kind of it's one economy, right? That's when you have complete free trade, it's very much like a one economy mentality,
right?
So businesses, put their businesses places where it's the best place for their business, right? Depending on demand, there's a lot of factors, right? Where you put a factory, there's a lot of analysis that goes into that. So, obviously we looked at some of those stats. We can show them later. Like, like Canada is 1/10 the size of the US in terms of economy, right? So like there isn't as much demand up here than there is down there. So you could build, I'm making this, this is not an exact example, but you could build a much bigger factory in America because there's a bigger demand, and arguably lower your cost of production, right? Because you're able to produce it at a much larger scale, and serve a bigger customer base because you're in America, but you can also ship to Canada. There are domestic can manufacturers. Don't get me wrong. I think there are some domestic, but it could never fulfill like total demand. So a lot of cans come out of America, right? So, and obviously the global trade benefit of that is if you have like the most efficient market, the biggest market for these companies to serve, it allows them to drive down their costs, which tends to drive down prices for consumers. That's the whole argument of free trade. It's like the bigger the market, the more efficient companies will be. And if it makes sense to put a factory in Toronto, they will, because they're going to say, I'm going to make more money by putting a factory in Toronto. Or they're going to say, no, I'm going to make more money putting a factory in America, which actually is the other part of why Trump's argument is so kind of asinine, which is if someone's going to come into North America, more likely than not, they will. There's a lot of factors to consider, like where are the customers, like where are the people, there's a lot of reasons why you have to say where you're going to put the factory. It's not like Canada is the number one place that a foreign company would want to put a factory. It's 1/10 the market, right? It doesn't like his normally it would be America. Now there could be reasons why you do put it in Canada. It could be we have more skilled labor, we have more land, which we do have more land. You know, it might be, you know, it might be easier to set up. It might be cheaper. Our dollar, right? Like the dollar effects, because your costs are in dollars, but you're selling in, maybe your costs are in Canadian, but you're selling in US. So it's a bit complicated, but it's not like Canada's crushing it on manufacturing. It's not like we're getting every single company coming, banging on our door to set up shop. We get some, but clearly America gets the lion's share. And for him to kind of insinuate that he needs to protect America more is, to me anyway, like crazy. But hence, like the argument is, you know, going back to your example, that's kind of what in practice happens. That happens with lumber, right? Like we send tons of lumber down there. They make furniture. They ship them back up to Canada. It happens. I mean, oils, like as we discussed, like they're refining it and then, you know, could be sending it back up. There's a lot of those, you know, instances for how the trade kind of system works. But I agree. The one thing that I think is relevant is I do think that, I mean, it would be great if, you know, Canadian companies could vertically integrate those supply chains so that we're making more value add products that we could send to America. But again, like, you know, it's a capital allocate, like it's private businesses, and people are going to do what they think makes sense, you know, for those businesses essentially.
Okay. That's like really interesting to hear. One of the main things, thank you for explaining all this, because I'm learning a bunch here. And that's what I want to put forward. If I'm saying anything, I'm just repeating stuff I've heard. I don't have the strongest opinions about a lot of this because I'm learning about it. But it almost seems like, maybe this is a bit naive, but I'm like, well, if we just made the plants in Canada the same size as they would be in America with the aim to sell to Americans, technically, and if we have all of the aluminium and they're just getting some from China, but if we stop selling the aluminium to America and we just make factories here, they're either going to only get it from China or they're going to have to come to us to get it. So then we could still sell it and make more money and then keep the money in Canada and keep the workers in Canada and keep the factories in Canada. Might be a bit of a simplistic view, but that's what it would seem to the layperson like me about that. But
yeah, but you got to remember there's a demand element to this, right? Like you just put, like,
wouldn't there be a demand if you stop selling it to them? Because then they can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, well, you would take well, theoretically, like right now, like their factory is selling some to America, some to Canada. You put a factory in Canada, now that Canada factory is going to take up that market share. It does lead to competition. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Like certainly that could happen. Or what could happen is you put, and this is the whole protectionist angle of what happens when you do tariffs, right? Or what could happen is, okay, Trump puts a tariff on and Canada puts a tariff on, and we say, okay, now we have to build our own factory, but we're only going to service Canada. And now Canada's demand is much smaller, right? So that factory now is less efficient. So when that factory is less efficient, then what happens is prices tend to rise. So that's really what happened when you start protecting industries. I mean, again, I'm sure that there's a more left-leaning economist person that would say otherwise, but I think that the theory behind it is that.
Right. Okay. So it's not as simple as just like, if we don't sell America our aluminium and we keep it here and then they can't really get it from anywhere, they're still going to need to buy it from us, but then they might, because there's not that many options, it sounds like, because then they put the tariff on the Chinese aluminium. So then what do they end up doing? Like, I think I'm just got a little.
Yeah,
it could work, but it might not work.
I think I mean, again, if you start, again, it goes back to, if you have really bad relations with the country, you don't sell them stuff and really like screw with them like that can cause friction, you know, from a security perspective as well. But yeah, like generally speaking, just the idea about, and this is more about, again, trade, not necessarily beer, but it's like when you have a bigger market to sell to, companies tend to be more efficient in terms of delivering goods. So it's not necessarily about, you know, there's two ways to look at that, right? One way is I need to keep domestic jobs. I need to have more domestic jobs in America. The other way to look at that is I'm just going to make everything cheaper in America. Like I'm going to make prices cheaper. So you can make it's all like people think of dollars in like nominal dollars. Like I made $1 today or whatever the number is, right? Versus the real thing that everyone, and this is why everyone says inflation is a silent killer. It's like what people need to care about is how much can I buy for what I made today? If all of a sudden you know, if you're making the same amount of money and all of a sudden everything is 50% cheaper, you're effectively like 50% more wealth. You know what I mean? Like that's the dynamic of why
Gotcha.
the whole argument of free trade, expand the pie, make things cheaper, make companies be more efficient, and this is the result. And that's in principle what would, I think, broadly happen.
Interesting. Okay, this is great. You're explaining a lot to me. I'll keep running through this list. By the way, I found the name of the dude. His name is Jay Southwood. He's the dude who posted it on Facebook, and then my friend Aaron Gore, Gore. He's the dude who reposted. So then we're nearly finished this, but I like getting this. Actually, kind of fun reading this out and getting your like live take on this as well. So this is cool. So now his next section was impact on you. He said, beers on tap. You will see the cost of beer on tap rise 15 to 25%. Once again, this is in America, in tap rooms and bars across the country. For example, $18 to $22 pints in Boston. Thoughts? Sounds about right, or a bit of an exaggeration?
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously, like every market's so different. So it's hard to, it's hard to say what the ingredient cost increase would be. But yeah, like,
but
certainly
if you just factor in 25% across the board, it kind of would.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Like at the end of the day, if you're really like, the thing is like labor, like if you're importing like not most companies import everything, right? So in theory, there's going to be a price increase. Like, cause I mean, if you think about it at a broad base, I think that like they projected that 25% tariffs would result in like 1 to 2% inflation in America. So it's not directly at 25, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not like 20, now all of a sudden everything is 25% more expensive. But I think, again, it depends. I think that certainly, beer is susceptible because, to your point, I think a lot of malt goes back and forth. And I think a lot of hops go back and forth. And that's the primary ingredient in beer, obviously, right? But if you're brewing in America, that's not going to change. And if you're brewing in Canada, that's not going to change. And it's more if you're selling from America to Canada, or vice versa, then it's going to have an impact.
That's no problem. Gotcha. In Australia, when I was there last was 2019, and it was $19 pints, and dudes were just buying me pints because I was visiting, and I was like, "Nah, man, you don't have to buy." And they're like, "Yeah, it's nothing, it's cool." And I've heard it's even worse than that now. I'm talking, dude. I'm not exaggerating. Like $60 4-packs, and they're not even like $15 cans of hazy IPAs, smoothie sours, pastry stouts, shit like that. And that's because mostly, I don't know if it's because they have to import a lot of ingredients, but there's a lot of excise tax in Australia on that. Mm-hmm. So for American, $18 to $22 pints in Boston, that's pretty crazy. It's pretty fucking wild. We paid out the dickhole for a coffee today. I was so vexed. Like, it was like between us. How much was the coffee, Tiff, today? How much was the coffee we paid for today in American? Like 16 or 7. Yeah. For a cortado and a latte, and a large latte, which wasn't that large, was about $16 or $17 US. So imagine that now, basically, with close to $1.48 or whatever it works out to be. It's the most expensive, and it was fine. It wasn't like shit, but it wasn't great. So it's already, things are already like, I don't know if that was just where we are. Oh, and eggs are 50% up. Eggs are 50% up since, would you say September? Since November. We went to where did we go? We went to Trader Joe's. No fucking eggs at all. Both Trader Joe's we went to in the last few days, no eggs at all, unless you're there before like noon, they said. So eggs are just selling us, being really hard to get hold of stuff. Like, it's already on some other shit down here as well. So it's we'd heard about the eggs thing, but it's fucking crazy. All right, we're not too far to go here. He said cans from taproom or at stores. You will see the price of these rise 20 to 30% when factoring in all the costs of barley cans and freight, as we were talking about the oil and freight and shipping. So how do you feel about your favorite 4-pack jumping from $16 to like $23? So that's the same shit as a beer on tap. So he said, synopsis. Literally no other commodity-based industry. Once again, this is his dude Jay Southwood's opinion on it. So this is not speaking for Shehan or myself. This is just reading out an American in the industry's position. Literally no other commodity-based industry was hit higher with higher inflationary costs than craft beer since 2020. Economists are on record with that fact. Couple this with changing tastes and a lack of interest from young people in alcohol in general. That's a fact. And we've talked about that here at length. And these tariffs could not be coming at a worse time. This will be absolutely be a death shot to many, if not most, craft breweries in the country, which is a big call. These small businesses have become needed community gathering spaces, facts, bringing back blighted areas of communities, large and small, across the country. I imagine you would be aligning with that, Shehan?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. He said, yet here we stand in the crosshairs of misguided shoot from the hip trade policies lobbied not just against foes, but our strongest ally and friend, which is once again, that's the vibe I get from Americans. I really feel that's how Americans feel. And we love y'all too. I wish the industry good luck, and I hope that clearer heads prevail soon before it's too late. And for my own opinions, once again, Jay's opinion, for anyone who plans to comment here, well, Trump just wants Canada to fix the border and stop illegals and fentanyl from coming in. Once that's done, he'll remove tariffs. 1% of all illegals and fentanyl come across the Canadian border. I have heard that fact elsewhere. 2, Canada has stepped up, invested $1.4 billion into border enforcement. I think that's what Tiff was talking about before, where that was suggested last year. 3, Trump has not returned calls to the Canadian Prime Minister since he took office. So that has obviously changed. So anyway, that was an American's opinion on where things are at. From that perspective, which I think plays in really nicely, Shehan, to what you were saying. I really feel like, do you feel like that echoes really? To me, that's what it felt like. Do you feel like that echoes what you were saying as well from the Canadian side?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, generally speaking, without all the number details, like I said, it'll depend, on a case by case basis. But yeah, I think that the theory makes a lot of sense, and definitely like the areas that he's talking about would make a lot of sense in terms of cost increases.
Right.
And in terms of it, like I can't speak for what's going on in the American scene, but obviously in Ontario, it's not been easy for craft brewers. Like, a lot of like the market's kind of slowed down. There's a lot of breweries still in the market. There's a lot of change in beverage alcohol with all this grocery and convenience expansion. And that expansion hasn't necessarily currently anyway, I think it benefited like the smaller or mid-sized breweries. It's benefited the largest breweries. So, I think that certainly, raising prices by 25% for most craft breweries would certainly, it's not happening. So it's either one of two things. Either they're going to do it and sales are going to slip and potentially significantly, or they're not, and they're going to try to eat the cost and then be less profitable or lose money. So, neither of those scenarios are pretty good.
Right. Canadian businesses suffer, therefore Canadian jobs suffer. And it's going to be, and it's already rough as fuck, man. I see lines around the block at the food banks in Hamilton. It's crazy. So to me, that's pretty terrifying. So, okay. Are you cool if we just pause for a sec? I'm going to grab my next beer because I didn't really put the cooler next to me like I normally do. We'll grab that, and then we'll. You've got a whole bunch of a few more numbers things right now as far as comparing the Canadian and American beer markets and the taxes, which I think is definitely something to get into, because if there's one opportunity, like COVID really showed us that when shit hits the fan, things can actually happen, and government not making things happen is something that I've had a lot of conversations with people like yourself and breweries. I've heard Hamilton, the default answer from the city is no. It's a fucking nightmare out there, and to me it's disgusting. Like I got so many stories that I could tell that aren't necessarily private, but probably a little out of context of this pod that piss me off to no end, and it's not even my business, and I just keep hearing about people getting screwed over. It really frustrates me. So it'd be cool to get into some of that. And one of those issues on top of the bureaucracy in general for permits and all of this nonsense and like changing the usage versus changing the zoning is the taxes. And once again, we spoke about it with you on the pod in 2023, I believe, or early last year, which I definitely highly encourage people to go listen to, but we're going to tap into some of that stuff now. Yeah, this is great. All right, I'll pause. We'll be back in a sec. And we are back. All right. Killing it so far. What do you got for your next beer, by the way?
It's our espresso stout.
Ooh, have I had that?
Or is it pretty
new?
Actually,
I don't think so, because it looks very sexy, like the espresso martini can.
Yeah, similar.
Which is something Tiff has been loving crushing. It pours. It's so wicked because it's nitro, and it's just so wicked to watch it. It looks so sick. That beautiful head, like naturally. What coffee beans do you use in that?
We use cold brew.
Use cold brew. Okay. Do you and you know who from? Is it like specific, or is it like a?
No, I'm not. No? Not off the top of my head.
Okay. I love it. And is it available now?
Yeah, actually just sold out. I think I just have a couple cans in the fridge.
Wow. When's it coming back then? Why you tease people? Excuse me. Why you
Uh,
tease the man then?
next, well, I think we'll bring it. That was pretty popular. So we typically do like a specific stout, but this one was really good. It was very well received. So I think we'll bring it back.
Okay. Yeah, I really like it. I feel like you guys do really fun stouts. Like espresso stout sounds sick. Like I like your the Neapolitan stout. Yeah, that was great. Like I feel like you do really great. And you had the sarsaparilla one, which I really liked as well. Yeah, you do some sick stouts, man. Like the espresso one is great. I feel like it'd be fun to see like collab with like a local roaster or something as well. And like kind of make a custom make like a bean profile to fit what you're looking for. I think that'd be sick. Maybe we could talk for the BOS anniversary.
Yeah.
Actually, I actually got something for you for that. We'll
There
talk
you go.
after.
Exactly.
I love that. So make sure, even if you can't get that Lost Craft, is it Lost Craft or High Park? Lost Craft,
It's
right?
less craft, yeah.
That's what I thought. Get down to the brewery and just get anything they got. It's one of the sick patios. The food was so good. When did we come and see you? It was still warm. It was still like October, maybe.
Yeah.
Food was so fire. Fried chicken sandwich is money. Oh, we had like a smash burger, I think, as well. That was
Yeah,
fire.
the burger, yeah.
Burger was killer, man. Like the food was so good. Patio's a vibe. Right next to the subway for those who want to get lit and don't want to drive and be responsible. It's a beautiful thing. So you're doing a coffee stout. Once again, this is my Stout Wednesday. So my 8% was my warm up. I went to Other Half in Philly on Wednesday last week, and this is a double sunset like barrel age thing. I think I can't even read it, but they actually have a coffee brand. So it's Other Half X Cloud Cover. So they have their own coffee beans brand called Cloud Cover. So Imperial Stout aged in, I can't see shit, the color of the writing, aged for 18 months in bourbon barrels with Cloud Cover, Layo Terage coffee and vanilla beans. It's 12%. So that's some hectic shit. So we're both coughing it up tonight, brother. How you feel? How you feel about that? Okay.
Late.
So I knew you'd feel good about it. So whilst I'm doing my little review and stuff, let's get into that next the next segment of this. Where are we going from here? So we've really covered the high level stuff, like what the tariffs are, what it kind of means. Should we start talking about some of the industry stuff? You've got some really good, like just to compare the size of the industry, probably to show the impact on a smaller industry like Canada, how much that's actually going to affect us. Should we go into like some of these images that you got here?
Yeah, we can. I mean, can you share them or?
I can share the screen to some of them, whichever ones. Like I basically could share the exact document.
Oh, okay,
yeah. That's probably the best way to actually set that up before. So, which one should I share first?
The
BA one, the graph.
I think the graphs. I mean, I guess the first one is the beer sales for Canada, like the total beer sales. I mean, it shows you the trend, which is not great, but I mean, it's great for health. It's bad maybe for beer.
Great for health, bad for beer. All right. So this is just the document that we're working from here. So I think if I actually zoom in a little more, I can show this larger on the screen. How's that?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Talk us through this graph.
So that graph is like total beer sales by volume in hectoliters for Canada. So it's essentially.
And this is just for Canada from 2009 to 2023.
Yeah. So it's declined pretty significantly, but yeah, so it's about 2 billion hectoliters.
What's interesting to me, the peak was 2010. How was that the case when the craft beer boom was in the 20-teens? What's up with that?
Well, this is total beer. This isn't craft beer.
Oh, total beer. But then why? Okay, so beer itself has gone down.
In aggregate, yeah.
Interesting. And what's the? I mean, 2010 at the peak, and this is 2000. Is it 2,350,000 hectoliters? Is that what that is? At the peak there, 2 billion hectoliters. I'm sorry, and then all the way down to still 2 billion, but just over 2 billion, as opposed to 2 point almost 2.5 billion.
Yeah.
Is that like a statistically significant decline, or what's the deal with that? Is that like Is that a problem?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, obviously the problem.
That's what, in any industry, you don't like, that's a bad graph.
Yes. Okay.
It's not a good graph to be in a declining industry. That's certainly
Gotcha.
not great.
Okay. And what does this? I mean, it just shows
So
kind of.
I think this is the trajectory of beer in Canada. I think that's probably like going back to like the stress in the industry right now. Like the trend is declining, right? So and then I think if you flip it to the chart that shows the American Canadian, the differences in size. I mean
this one.
I mean, this is something. This is just more general information. But if you keep going down,
this one.
I keep
Next
going
one?
down.
Oh, this one.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So this kind of shows you like relative the total size and then the relative share. So again, a million, so a billion, so 2 billion hectoliters for total beer, 2 billion. Sorry,
is that 2?
No,
if we go on, which one are we going? The total share in the so
No,
then
yeah.
so
Yeah,
2
it's actually 1.6. Yeah, it's 2 million, right? That's shared.
2 million.
It's 2 million. Yeah.
So that means the other one was 2 million from the other one we were looking at.
No,
not
the other
2
one was
million.
2 billion. That's 2 billion.
Oh, because this is like Canadian beer market size by volume,
Yeah.
as opposed to what was the other one then? Was that when you said what was the other one measuring?
The chart was volume 2, but that was for the total market. So that's a 2 billion, right? You see craft and total.
Okay, so that's the 2 billion. Then underneath the American is 17 billion.
Exactly. So I mean, but the crazy statistic there, right, is that the U.S. craft market is bigger than the total Canadian market.
There you go. So U.S. just for that. So the total Canadian market is 2 billion hex. The American craft beer market is essentially 2.7 billion hex. This is hectoliters, not barrels.
Yeah, this is converted to hectoliters.
Converted to hex. So that's pretty insane. And the total Canadian craft beer market includes like Labatt, Molson, Moosehead, all the big dogs.
Yeah, I would say like the interesting statistic, if you just compare, because the size of the economy. So Canada is 1/10 the size of the economy for the U.S., right?
Yeah,
think about it, like
41 million, and they've got 330-ish as far as people. Is that right? Oh, you're talking economy size?
No, total economy. Yeah, I mean, you could talk about
population.
it in people too, but even I mean, but like simplified as like the economy of America is 10 times bigger, or Canadian economy is 1/10 the size of the American economy. Okay. So if you use that math, you would say, okay, so that if the Canadian beer market's 2 billion hex, then the American market should be around 20 billion hex, right?
Okay.
I mean, if you use that same mathematics, right? Just rough math. But the interesting thing is it's the share on the US side, right? Like it's very interesting that the share on the US side is so much more significant than the share in Canada.
Insanely so. And I guess it's always kind of been that way, like the US has always, I mean, obviously just by the sheer volume of people, but also like the craft beer was essentially invented here in the States, and it's kind of like it just picked up quicker, I guess, just once again kind of by sheer numbers. So obviously the people always have something to do with that growth. At the end of the day, they're always going to sort of drive it. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's true.
Plus capitalism.
Yeah. Well, plus exactly. I mean, I think that that's probably true, but I think it is still a pretty, like, again, I think if you converted these charts to dollars, I think it would tell a little bit of a different story in terms of, because like volume in dollars, as you know, craft beer is more expensive than all domestic beer. I mean, not all, but a lot of the time, right? So like, buck of beer is in the total volume for Canada. So like there's a lot cheaper beers in those totals. So certainly I think if you did this by dollar, it'd be higher, but then it would also arguably be higher for the US too. So I think at the end of the day, you just have to like generically understand that the US beer market has grown a lot. And certainly like it is, the US states are complicated to get into for beer, but as you know, like one thing that's kind of very certain across the US, if you compare it to Canada, with the exception of Alberta, is access to market is much easier within states, right? Meaning like it's basically privatized everywhere.
For the
So,
most
like,
part, aside from the 3-tier system, which is pretty crazy.
you're right, but I mean, again, we're talking generally, right? Like we're talking
Yeah.
across the entire country. But
It's a
it
lot
also,
easier. Yeah. There's
yeah,
so
exactly,
so much less restriction. Yeah.
exactly.
So I didn't take photos of this. So then, okay, what year was this data from, by the way?
2023, I think.
2023. Sounds about right. Now, this number here, Canada has 0.1% of a share of the beer industry is craft, whereas America is 15.3%
It's by volume.
by volume. That's still like insane. Like 15 to 0.1 is, even if it's by volume, I mean, it's still like extraordinarily significant, whether it's dollars or
I was
pennies.
surprised seeing this. Like, I mean, I was surprised by seeing the stat too. It seemed light to me, but
It seemed light in like, this seems
I would have
crazy.
thought
Like,
it was higher too.
yeah, I just would have like, not that like, obviously we know that like no one's under any mistaken impression that Canada has a higher craft beer share. We all know that it's a lot less here, but like 0.1 to 15 is fucking crazy. Like that's so much more in the US. That really speaks to like, you go to almost any gas station in random butt fuck nowhere here driving down, and you're going to find a decent selection of craft beer. We went to some random towns to get gas, and whenever I go in there to go to the bathroom, I'm always like, oh, let me see what craft beer they've got. And it's always like kind of reasonable. It's like, Sierra Nevada, or I don't know, Oscar Blues, or some shit like that, or New Belgium, whatever. It's not like, it's all decent stuff. It's the national brands, but they're all like pretty solid stuff. And it's not, this is just random gas station in Canada. Like only, you're not going to get anything really outside. Or gas stations only started very, very, very recently. In Montreal, it was always garbage stuff. It was always like just the big guys. You never would find craft there. And I don't know if that's still the case. I don't think so. I don't think it's changed. But I mean, just here, it's just that sheer availability. Every grocery store. I saw Collective Arts at the one around the corner from where we're staying at a place. I sent a picture to Dan, who's out there. Super impressed. I was like, damn, all right. The non-alc stuff, anyway, it was there. Which I guess is a lot easier than distroing the other thing. But it's very, very different. It's just much more prevalent. You go to any restaurant, they always have a selection of craft beer. It doesn't matter where you go. Every single place. It seems to have been more ingrained in the culture here, hence that number, which seems about right.
Yeah, I mean, I was in St. Louis, like,
when
this was like last year, I think.
Did you go to a side project?
I went there for it was like an American Distilling Conference, but then like that's the headquarters of Bud, right? Like,
yeah. Why did you go to side? I can't believe you didn't tell me. I would have told you to go there. You fucking.
Exactly. I saw the Clydesdales, like shout outs to Bud. Maybe not right now. Right now.
Not right now. I think we should pull up
Yeah,
shout with the first episode we ever did with shout outs back in 2016 or 15. No shout outs. We done. Yeah. We off that. We off that tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that was a massive brewery. Anyway, long story short is like you would think like Budweiser dominated at bars and restaurants. No, like you would see an occasional one Bud tap, but it's like all craft beer.
Right. Which
like, it's dominant.
It's so dominant. And you know what? Even compared to Quebec, I actually want to shout out Ontario because I feel like I could go to any restaurant in Ontario and there'll usually be some craft beer. It might not be the most fire stuff, but it's like, if I can get a steam whistle, I'm happy type shit, like the larger stuff.
For sure.
I like that a lot, but in the States, it's sort of like, I dare you to go to a place that doesn't. Like, you'd have to go to a dive bar that only sells PBR and Miller High Life or something type shit. Whereas you're right, everywhere you go always has a craft beer selection.
I mean, obviously, like we'll get to this later, right? But then I think the more interesting question about that is, what's different, right? And we'll dive into I mean, part of this is obviously really driving back to kind of what's happening right now, but certainly like what's different between the markets is relevant.
Yeah.
Because the disparity is significant. Yes,
significant is an understatement. Talk us through the tax part, because once again, Let me just find the episode. BAOS podcast, Shehan. Let me see when the last one was. We did 2016, 2017, 2022, 2024. How can craft beer win? Episode 157. How can craft beer win? That was the last one we did, and that was when we talked about the taxes, about the Ontario tax and all the different things that's happening there. So I'd encourage people to go listen to that on the adjunct series, 157. But talk us through this, because we never compared like overall Canadian to American. It was very much just talking about Ontario specifically, because that's what the conversation was at the time. So yeah, talk us through this one, man, because this paints the stark reality of how heavily alcohol is taxed in Canada and how badly that affects the industry. Like, it really is a stranglehold. Like, it's really holding everything back.
Yeah, I mean, comparatively, like the federal rate, and this, I believe it's up to 60,000 barrels or something. I gotta the ranges here are a little bit different, but broad strokes, yeah, like you can see the federal excise tax are on the low end, effectively 1/5 of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And then for state tax, I mean, on the bottom end, it's like, obviously it's volume based, but like on the bottom end is like almost nothing. And on the top end, again, approximately, close to like a fourth or a fifth difference compared to Canada. So
crazy.
Now, I mean, again, like, you there's a policy thing here too, right? It's alcohol. It's not the best thing to be consuming. So, there's an argument to say like you can tax it. But I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is that there's a significantly larger craft beer, market in the US compared to what it is in Canada. That's just, that is what it is.
But does that, I understand the market's larger, and therefore if they tax smaller, you're still going to generate a lot of revenue, and there's got to be a sin tax, obviously. I think that's not unfair to have a sin tax on products like tobacco, alcohol, THC, whatever, that are essentially not a positive thing for the health of human beings, right? Not arguing that. At the same token, I don't know if we talked about it in the episode with you, but Tiff and I did the link up presentation in 2023 at the OCB, and there was like, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was around 600 and something billion dollars per year that craft beer generates for, I don't know if it was just Ontario or if it was Canada as a whole, I can't remember. And that and craft is the majority, way more than, as far as the revenue that it generates for the country or the province, whatever it was so much more, because of the, like, yes, you've got like the big plants, you got the Bud plant and the Coors plant, all that stuff out there that hire a lot of Canadians. So we obviously don't want to fuck with their jobs because it's important too. But there's way more people being supported by craft beer, way more, like so much more. So it's like the amount that we generate is so heavy, the tax revenue, and then you got the LCBO revenue and all this stuff. Like, you can't even distribute anything. Like, if you're going to sell to a fucking bottle to a restaurant, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to go through essentially the LCBO is like the middleman to sell to a restaurant, right? They get a piece of the pie, no?
Not for beer, for spirits, yeah.
For spirits, yes. Okay. Either way, the government's getting their
for sure,
right? And it just feels like, and if you want to maybe talk through the state and provincial, because I imagine that this Canadian craft beer tax per liter, that's the Ontario rate.
Correct.
62
exactly.
Now, what the Alberta rate is like 10 cents a liter.
Yeah, it's right? Much lower. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this has been a beef with Ontario for a long time.
Okay. So one of the things, I'm glad that you brought this tax stuff up, because one of the things that Tiff and I have been talking, because this has been, we had 24 hours of driving over the last week. So we're talking about a lot of this stuff. And obviously, one of to us, and tell me what you think it is, it's so clear, and we've talked about this on the pod, like the opening the borders of distribution of alcohol between all 13 provinces and territories. Is it 13? I passed my citizenship test. I should know better.
Wow, this is gonna be awkward for all of us right now, being like super Canadian.
Like, wait, I don't know. I got 20 out of 20.
10 provinces and 3 territories.
Yeah, that's what I thought. 13. Yeah, bitch. I fucking know what's up. I passed that shit.
But three are territories. They're not provinces.
Yeah, no, but I said provinces and territories.
Oh, okay,
in Australia,
okay,
it's like
okay,
seven states and 3 territories or some bullshit like that. I've forgotten Australia. I should know. So if Lost Craft has a customer in Vancouver, British Columbia, you can't sell them your beer. If just I lived in Vancouver and I wanted to buy your beer because you are able to do shipping, you can't send it to me legally. At this point, with this context of this tariff stuff and all of this trade war shit and really supporting local, like if you really supported local, bring that shit the fuck down. Now, I have heard that all of those basically you can, but the problem is that each province, and this is the same in America too, to be fair, if Ontario wants to ship to BC, Ontario and BC have to have a reciprocal tax agreement. So if I'm in BC, you as Lost Craft have to charge me BC tax. You can't charge me Ontario tax. I have essentially an address, a shipping address in New York State. I get this brand Burial. I ship it. I usually make an order like once a month. I get Burial shipped to me in New York. They have to charge me New York State tax, but they didn't always do. They only opened that in like August last year, and then they opened Massachusetts. So they had to have. They're in North Carolina. They had to have reciprocal agreements with all of those states. So I'm not mad at that, but just. I don't know if you can speak to it, but like, what the fuck? Like, do you think that one, why hasn't that happened? Why hasn't just somebody figured that out? And two, like, do you think that maybe this could push that movement forward? Because I know that during COVID, and I'm not going to say any names, obviously, because I'm not a snitch, but I know that there are some breweries and wineries that are cool with shipping anywhere in Canada. If I was in Halifax, I could order from a brewery in Alberta and they would send it to me if you knew the right one. So those are not examples that are accurate, but I know of specific businesses who would, and I absolutely applaud them. Fuck that. Get your money, bro. Get your money. I love it. Do you think that maybe that could change the perception of, not the perception, sorry, change the actual like regulations of a lot of these things and allow Canadian alcohol producers beyond just beer, by the way? This is kind of more like speaking for spirits, which I know obviously you have local spirits, which is so cool that you have that. For cider companies, for wine, like, do you think that we could, like, what could be the impact of opening that trade, like you mentioned earlier about the east-west trade as opposed to north-south? Like, should we just open that up and just let everyone do what they need to do to really grow Canada? Because the laws don't currently seem to support that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure beverage alcohol is kind of tricky, but yeah, I mean, certainly it is complicated, but you're right. Like, it's complicated to do business in different states, especially for alcohol. It's different in every state. Mm-hmm. It's different in every province. I knew some people that have worked in beverage alcohol for a while, and they've said Canada definitely has a very unique makeup in terms of like different provinces having different kind of procedures. You know, BC has private, public. Alberta's fully private. Other provinces are fully public. You know, so like it's different, like across each. I wouldn't say public. I mean run by the province. Right. Each province or territory is kind of different. Certainly, like, you know, craft beer, I think from where it started to where it is now is a little bit more tricky, right? There are amazing breweries in BC. There are amazing breweries in Ontario. There's amazing breweries in Alberta. I mean, there's amazing breweries in every province. But what I'm saying is it's harder to compete interprovincial in craft beer. Craft beer is a localized product, right? So with beer, you know, like, I think to your point, like, it's possible. But I mean, there's probably, you got to be pretty hardcore into a brand to want to pay for shipping, you know, for long distances, for small dollar values. Like, it's not like, I don't think that's going to necessarily result in a bunch of change.
But letting them have it. Like, what if there's a savvy consumer like myself that there's a brewery called Slow Hand, which I really love. They make Crispies. You'd love them. They're in Vancouver. I would love for them to be able to make an order for them. But I can't, unless they'll do some dodgy under the table shit. And some do, some don't. And I wouldn't want to ask a brewery to do that. Like, it might not move the needle, but it's a start.
It's a start, yeah, for sure. I mean, that part, that I think there's probably an easy agreement there to do that, for sure. Mm-hmm. I kind of always err on the side of access. I just want it's up to our company to sell, but access is great, right? Like getting the product onto shelf and then compete for the sale. That's kind of like the Alberta market, where
I like that. That's a great way to put it.
It's easy to, you get in, you pay to get there, but then you're there, and now it's your job to sell. Like that to me is an easier model than really closed, restricted, markets. So anyway, like
free trade, which is what we've been talking about the whole fucking time. That's
more or less, yeah, exactly.
Free trade, but internally as opposed to externally.
Totally. But again, like I really don't think that that's going to change. I think craft beer will always effectively be localized. It's hard to be a national craft brewer. Like that existed. Sure. You know what I mean? Like there are some big breweries here, and I'm not saying that it'll never happen, but it's really hard to do because you're effectively like an Ontario brewery competing in BC. Now you're competing with BC breweries. Okay. And that's a hard sell. I mean, if you can tell, like in Ontario, how many out of province breweries do you see competing? It's not that they couldn't do it. Like Superflux is an amazing brewery out of Bank, and they're in the LCBO, but
but they brewed in Ontario by Craft Brand Co. It's not like imported type shit. Yeah,
exactly. But it's still difficult, right? Like you're competing with that person that's sponsoring the hockey team, that's connected into the community. That's the whole ethos of the craft beer. So I think like that scalability is not necessarily there. I think it's definitely going to be different for other industries, more so than, for other products, probably like ready to drink products, spirit products. That for sure, I think could be a bigger sell for beverage alcohol. Mm-hmm. Beer, I definitely think there's an opportunity in beer. I don't think that I don't think it's going to move the needle as much, but I think anything helps, to your point. Anything helps for Canadians to be able to sell stuff to Canadians, generally speaking, right?
That's really what I'm saying.
It's kind of wild that that's not the case. And yeah, obviously, like the biggest one is Quebec. Like that's the biggest and hardest and most complicated of all the provinces to get into.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's insane. Obviously, I lived there for 10 years. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, the only Ontario brewery that I ever saw was Bellwoods they did a tap takeover and vice versa in like 2017 or something. And I was like, yo, like I went to Toronto all the time. That's how we met, obviously. So I got to try beers from all over the whole time I lived in Montreal. But nobody really bothered to even try in Quebec because it was that difficult. I know that True History just did a tap takeover at Mellon recently, which was dope because they're friends. But like, it's a real shame. It's more just like, it just seems so like backwards, and it's more just like, well, all of these rules aren't real. Like I don't know if people like, you got to really step back sometimes and be like, the humans made these rules, like they're not real. Like we could stop these rules anytime. Like it's not like some all powerful fucking being divine thing has come down and like, you cannot sell across this invisible line between it. Like, bro, figure it the fuck out. Let people win. This is rough times, bro. People are lining up at food banks. Like I'm saying, people are sleeping in the park in -20 in a tent. Fix it. Figure it the fuck out. And if you've got to like change some rules, like you couldn't pour growlers in Quebec until 2018. You couldn't have a cool ship in Quebec until around the same time. And that was from a law that was made in 1928 because we looked it up. It was a fucking Depression era prohibition law. It's so stupid to me. I can't I'm a very logical dude. I don't like illogical stuff when it comes to finances and economics and things like that. And like bureaucracy moves slow and it's ridiculous. It truly is. And I just feel like whilst I agree with you that it's not in craft beer, the future of craft beer is local. And I think you're 100% right. I just don't think that you, Shehan, Lost Craft High Park, as a business owner, shouldn't be able to sell any of your products to somebody in Halifax or Vancouver or fucking Edmonton if they so choose. Like maybe they came and visited one time and they were like, yeah, I've been thinking about that beer that Lost Craft did the whole time. I really want to get it. And you're not allowed to send it to them unless they have a mate out there, but maybe they don't have any friends to go and get it for them there. Well, so
you might have heard that we hit the news recently just about this whole thing. And it was talking about the guy that I forget if he went into Ontario and crossed the border or was in Quebec. And
Gerard Como?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
It was New Brunswick and Quebec.
Yeah, there you go.
And
Right.
he brought about like 30 cases of whatever it was, something from Quebec to bring back into New Brunswick, and he got caught.
Right.
And
Well,
because he had a store and it was cheaper in Quebec. Yeah.
but the funny thing is, like, you look at the like these like so and this is, maybe part of the, things that maybe we should consider is that, obviously America, you may see, like, states have different laws, right? Or
Yes.
different kind of barriers or whatever. But the difference is also, the economy of Texas is as big as Canada,
Right.
or bigger.
Is
So
that true?
like, it's different, to say, like, so yeah, so you could be selling in Texas like a similar volume than what people sell in all of Canada.
That's
So
crazy.
if you think about that, like, more broadly, like, each province, and obviously certain provinces are bigger than others. They're pretty small markets. So does it really make sense to have, like, a completely different system for those very, very small markets? Like, one
No,
could
it
argue
doesn't.
not, right? Like, maybe it makes sense.
Consistent tax across the board, consistent
Exactly.
shipping. Like,
Exactly. Like, and I think that would certainly help. Obviously, it would certainly help trade. But, like, to your point, you're going to have an issue where, are you off the webcam?
yeah, no, I'm here. I'm frozen. My battery died, so I'm just changing it. I'm good.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. We're back in action. Sorry, I should have told you. I was just trying to do it real slick.
No, but I mean, obviously, like, the problem becomes, if you're at Ottawa, if you're in Ottawa, or, like, around there, and you can go into Quebec. In one area, the same case is cheaper than the other.
Yes.
What are you going to do? And now it's illegal to cross the border, right? Like, I mean, this
If
is
you
what
get caught.
If you right, but
Sorry, but it's if you get caught. Like, most people are not going to get caught because cops aren't checking for that shit because it's so minimal. The Gerard Comeau dude was bringing 30 cases. It's a very different conversation because he was reselling it, obviously, in his store. Well, I don't agree, because I think he was just a capitalist doing what he wanted to do, and I respect that, because I think that people should be able to make money and he discovered a way to do that better. So good for fucking him, but he got caught and he became the poster boy for not bringing beer between provinces and shit.
But yeah, all that being said, I agree, like, for sure, like, simplifying the barriers more broadly across provinces would certainly help. It would help Canadian industry. Again, within the beverage alcohol industry, it's a bit trickier, but yeah, certainly, I think that overall it would definitely help Canadians, period.
Yeah, which is what we're here to talk about. Okay, let's look at the next one. Which is the next one should I go to? This one or the other one?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of just driving home the same point, right?
Okay,
The level of tax
differential. So consumer beer taxes are about 5 times higher in Canada in comparison to the US. So it's about $20 per case in Canada versus $4 per case in the US. And I have noticed the beer is a lot cheaper here. All the beer I have, I don't really get from grocery stores that much. Like, I went to breweries on the way down here and I came with about 3 cases of shit. So I have a pretty absurd amount that'll last me most of my time here. Excuse me. But so I don't know if the tax thing was still a thing, because none of the beer I bought was cheap. Nothing was cheap at all. So Canadian consumer beer tax components. So you got the federal excise beer tax, federal sales tax, provincial beer commodity taxes and charges, and provincial sales taxes. The general tax loads are higher than their US counterparts. And Canadian provincial sales taxes on beer generate about twice as much government revenue on beer sales as equivalent state or county sales taxes in the US. Twice as much. That's pretty crazy. And on average, provincial beer commodity taxes, not sales tax, just commodity taxes, are 13 times more than the average state excise beer taxes. So, for example, $12.32 per case in Canada for the provincial beer commodity taxes. And in America, it's 93 cents. So $12.32 to 93 cents. That's 13 times more. Bonkers. And that's the difference. Like, look, I don't even want to. I've spoken to a lot of American breweries here as well, and I've got some pods coming up in the next couple of weeks. where I'm sure this will probably come up as well. And it's not like things are easy for American breweries either. So I don't want to give that impression. But I mean, the Canadian tax system, that's the thing that like I feel like with, all right, I'll just say it. I love Canada, but one of the things that pisses me off is that we get the worst of democratic socialism and the worst of capitalism. Like we get fucked on taxes so bad. Now, if my roads were perfect, if I could go, like it took me 11 months to see a medical professional that I waited, and I only got in because I called multiple times, even when their automated system says don't call, but I still spoke to them, and then they wouldn't have got me in if I didn't call. I want to get just a simple dermatology thing looked at. The person that took me 11 months to get into said they've been referring people to dermatologists, and there are no dermatologists around that will take anybody. So the whole system is broken, but our taxes, the amount of money that we pay for our company in taxes is so insane, and your company is so much bigger than ours, so I can only imagine what you pay. It hurts my soul to know how much money we pay that gets stolen by politicians. They just fucking take it, like, look into it. I'm saying both sides. I'm saying this is an independent. It disgusts me to my core how much we get fucked. And to know that we're paying all this. If I was paying taxes this high and getting great services and everything was killer and like everybody had homes and like everyone, people who were struggling were able to get a little helping hand and like everything was going good, dude, I'm cool with it. But we're getting just fisted, bro. We're getting fucking nothing for this shit. And it's not okay. This is not the Canada that I fell in love with 15 years ago. I'm not going to lie. Like people can say what they want, but this is not what I fell in love with. And I'm like, and you see this type of example and stuff and you're like, we're paying all of this for what? The fuck are all these alcohol companies paying it for? For what? Is it for Doug Ford to pocket it? For Trudeau to pocket it? Like the fuck out of here, bro. Both sides are out of control. Sorry, man. Starting on my 12% stout shit. So I'm going to try and chill out. How about this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of just looking at the U.S. This was a bit of that that discussion from before, but yeah, again, just the market size is the U.S. market's so much bigger, but this is just more. This adds import to the mix.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, again, like just the trend. I mean, you're looking at the trend too, right? It's overall down. So
overall down 5.1. So for those who are listening and not watching, so the overall beer in the US, this is a Brewers Association US beer sales volume for 2023. Do you want to just talk through it, just so people who are listening can hear as well?
Yeah, down 5% overall, craft down 1%, import down 1%. So obviously, like domestic down even further. So it's like industry's contracting, has been for a little while. So certainly, again, it goes back to when in a contracting industry, having like a tariff shock, higher costs, higher prices, that's going to just go way worse. Like, the problem's going to get worse. No question.
It's so crazy. And this here also says craft beer has 13.3% share. Import beer has 23.2% share, and then other domestic is 63.6%. So import was honestly the one that shocked me the most. I just kind of never really considered that. 23% of import, 63% domestic, and 13% craft. It's kind of wild. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty fucking crazy. Obviously, those three things don't add up to 100%. Actually, now I'm looking at it, they add up to more than 100%. Because
yeah, I think the numbers are a little bit off because with the math, but.
Yeah, but whatever. The
They're probably drinking when they put this chart together.
Some fantastic local craft beer from their local favorite brewery that they're supporting because they want to support the employees. It's a beautiful thing. Is this the last chart? Should I take this off and we'll?
Yeah. That's I think the last chart. Yeah, that was
okay. Beautiful. Those are really helpful. Thank you for sending that, man. These are great. So okay, so we looked at all of that about all the different stuff. So basically we're saying why market share isn't growing. So it's the high taxes. We're talking about Canada again now. High taxes. We're talking about trade barriers within the provinces and relative to provincial trade, which is what we're saying, and the larger brewer monopolies. Is there anything you want to expand on any of those three things, bro?
Well, I want to say the trade barrier, this goes back to the trade barrier. We talk about trade barriers within across provinces, right? But you didn't mention the trade barriers within provinces.
Ooh, talk to me. Talk to me.
Right. Like, I mean, a lot of breweries have talked about this, like wanting to have additional retail stores. Can't do it. Right.
Explain that as well, by the way, because I heard about this recently and I only learned in this last episode. So this is episode 9, episode 8, which is actually coming out tonight as we're recording this. They explained, I thought that if you and I wanted to go into business together and we could just rent an open store and we could call it Shehan and C's beer store. We could just we could buy beer, buy some food, whatever, make it cool. We can't do that. It has to be an addendum to an additional to an existing business, like a cafe or some shit like that. And Lost Craft, if you wanted to go and open a store in fucking Vaughan or something, you can't do that. Or because you only get two places. You get 2 places physically. If you
and obviously, like I'm talking about Ontario. It goes back.
So
to yeah. So it's complicated because every province is different. But let's just like you can Ontario kind of paints a specific picture. Okay. So yeah, so breweries are capped at essentially two retail stores. So and that retail store has to be tied to a production site. So I can't have a brewery in X location and then just open a store. I need to actually build another brewery at that location to have a store. And then let's hypothetically say that I wanted to build a third location. I could build a location to brew the beer, but I can't have a store. So the store element of it goes back to and like at the end of the day, like obviously my last piece is obviously like talking about the large brewer monopoly system that's driven beverage alcohol in Canada to begin with. But, effectively when you go through that exercise, you realize like, it's not easy. We're taxed very high and we're restricted in terms of like how we can market our products. So it benefited like when there was Molson and Labatt I say Molson and Labatt, but they're the big domestic Canadian brewers. And then whatever brands that they carried, 40, 50 years ago, whenever like brands were kind of proliferating across Canada, there wasn't a lot of competition. There wasn't a lot of choice. And they scaled up so big, and then they kind of set they rigged the system in a way. They lobbied government. They pay higher taxes than us. And you have to always remember that. Like those guys pay triple the tax, but they also produce at such a high level that they're still profitable. Like they're not losing money. They're making money. So they're producing at such a high level in such an efficient way that those brands are still fine. Right. But the system was built with the beer store and the restriction in access to market, with like adding on to the LCBO. And now I will say this, the one thing that the provincial government's done pretty consistently is expanded access, which is great. Okay.
Which is like convenience and grocery and gas stations.
But again, like who is that benefiting? I mean, there's a debate, I think, about who's that benefiting directly. But either way, more broadly, I think that the bigger picture issue is it's fine if every province has their own set of rules, but make it easier to get products to craft consumers, right? That like ultimately, like that's the thing that, I think needs to be front of mind from my perspective because at the end of the day, we're talking about this stem from this tariff discussion. The tariff discussion is relevant because it's tough out here for small businesses, and we just want to work hard and sell our products. We can't do that if we're jumping through 50 million hoops to do that, right? And that's really the biggest problem. So I think like you can talk about interprovincial, but then there's like what's happening in my home market and how easy is it for me to get my product to a consumer that wants to buy it. It's still our job to sell it. I always say that you can't be lazy about this. It's like the idea is there isn't a handout mentality here. Someone still has to pick up that can or bottle or whatever off the shelf and take it home. But it shouldn't be really difficult to do that. More broadly for any business, it should be very easy to start a business, but that's not the case. I can assure you that's not the case in Canada. And I think the government's been doing that a little bit more and more, but but it's certainly still not an easy road to start a business with all the licensing and the rules, restrictions, regulations. It's the one thing that I will say that the American mentality does a little bit better than us, I think, is more on the trying to whittle down regulation to make it easier for entrepreneurship. And the proof is in the pudding. Like, the most valuable businesses, I mean, it's the biggest economy. It's not exactly 1-to-1, but I mean, certainly, like, they have a lot of extremely valuable businesses that have all been started by, entrepreneurs that have been driven to, succeed. Canada has that too. I mean, we've had RIM. Unfortunately, that didn't work out the way that that everyone would have liked. But we have Shopify. We do have like some big companies now in tech and in other spaces. But it's got to be easier to start businesses. I mean, craft beer is a microcosm because it's such a localized business. But you can apply the same framework to anything. It just needs to be a little bit easier, and obviously, in my opinion.
You are preaching to the choir so fucking hard. A quick example of this, dude, I'm extremely passionate, and I'm mostly passionate about it because of you and all of the people that I speak to in this industry. I don't want to say names. I don't think it's really a problem, but basically I read on Reddit this company wanted to start an axe throwing business that was attached to a brewery, and I didn't know who it was at the time, and they were explaining what happened. They found this space, and they were like, okay, we want to get it going, and the zoning was good, but the usage had to change. The government were trying to charge them $103,000 for a bureaucratic paperwork usage change. Already, I'm just like, I want to fucking strangle somebody. I don't know these people at all. I ended up finding out who the brewery was. I don't want to say it just in case, but basically they end up having to give up the business, and this brewery actually was that was their sort of space that they were leasing out, and it was all the government because they have a default no. I've heard other breweries, particularly in Hamilton, that have just told me the amount of nonsense they've had to go through. Like, for example, they've had to go to the office. They would all the different permit offices would give them essentially misinformation, like straight up lies. They would have to read the fucking small print, find the exact clause that showed that they were wrong, and then email them to be like, clause 13BIX says this. So yeah, I actually am good. And then they won't even apologize. They'll be like, cool, here's your permit. Like, it's a default no. And I think the only way for Canada to move forward, I understand red tape, and the red tape was probably started from a good place, whereas like, hey, let's make sure we don't kill people, because we used to put cocaine in Coca-Cola, and we used to do all this crazy shit and put asbestos in houses and stuff. So like, obviously you want to make sure that people are okay. And I think one of the great things about Canada is we don't have these ridiculous things, the high fructose corn syrup. We got a lot of like cool things there that they don't have here in the States. But it just went too far. It went so too far. And you're right, dude. Like, entrepreneur, like, Tiff and I have a business, and it's a digital business. So that's why we can work from here. We can work from anywhere. It doesn't matter. But you guys, I have so much respect for you guys and everything that you do. When I say you guys, I mean the breweries and anybody in any industry that has to put money up to get a physical space that make our main streets what they are, that make you want to leave the house and go park your car and go for a walk and see what's going on in the street and go visit this cool local business, excuse me, and go to a bar and be able to find local spirits or Lost Craft or High Park. Like, that is what it's all about. And the government, by default, I really think, because I heard the conservative leader, he was talking about, he's incumbent, I guess, like coming in, oh, that's not the right word. The guy who might be voted in, who knows? But he was saying about the what they want to do for building houses, like penalize developers if they don't meet deadlines and stuff. And I never heard that before. Like, that's pretty sick. Why can't they do that for businesses? If you're a government agency, you should have to say yes to everything, and you should lose money as an employee if you say no. If you stop people from getting their goal, it shouldn't take you more than 24 hours to get a permit, not a year. Fucking make it happen, bro. Get the fuck out of here. Dude, it makes me so mad because it's irrelevant. It's not real. It's fake. Everything is fake. And government employees have been incentivized to do nothing forever. They fucking do nothing. They know it's a cruisy job. They get a government job so they can sit on their fucking dickholes and do jack shit forever. I hate it. It makes your life so difficult. So like, I just think we need aggressive 180 on all of this stuff. It has to change. Otherwise, this country's fucked. And not just Canada. Like, I think Australia is a nanny state too. Australia is out of control. Like, you can't go 1 kilometer over the speed limit without being pulled over. Everyone, you can't drink. If you want to go, this is about a silly thing to talk about. But like, I know that I can comfortably be under the limit. I would probably have a maximum of 3 drinks if I'm going out before driving, because I know what I can deal with. In Australia, they have standard drinks, which is like a 5% Pilsner or whatever is maybe 1.2 standard drinks or some shit. I don't know how they do it. But when I was there last, like if someone's driving me somewhere, they'd have a drink at the very beginning of the night at 8 p.m. And when we leave at 2 a.m., they've just drank water for the rest of the night because they're so terrified of the booze buses. I got pulled over by Ride in Canada, and I didn't know for the first time like 3 months ago. And they're like, so in Australia, they have a thing called a booze bus. They see these big buses, cops everywhere. They pull you over. You get breathalyzed. Everyone they pull over gets a breathalyzer. In Canada, they go, hey, man, you had a drink today? I'm like, no. He's like, maybe later? I'm like, yeah, maybe later. You know, it's Sunday. All right, have a good day. I'm like, you just fucking asked me? I could have said anything. Like, it was so funny to me. I couldn't believe it. That they just ask you a question. In Australia, they're like, fuck you. Breathalyze. Boom, take your car if you fucking blow over. So I got used to finding out what I can do. Obviously, I don't want to drive badly, and I don't tend to drink and drive, but I'm saying there's like a lot of like between the two countries that I've lived in, they're very that nanny state ideology, I guess, if you want to, for lack of a better word, is so prevalent and so ridiculous that it's inhibiting growth. And I feel like that's why you're right. That's why the United States is doing now. They've got a lot of problems here. They got a lot of fucking problems here. And I don't like whatever. You can debate what system is best, but trying to stop people to create beautiful things that help their community, that their community are interested in, doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I just don't think it's the way forward. It doesn't. If it stops progress and people claim to be progressive, then that's not progress. Like, it's completely backwards, and it makes no sense. I don't know how to change it because I don't know which side everyone. There's sides. Why do we have sides? Fuck, this is getting philosophical. Like, it's not, everything isn't black and white. The world is gray. Why do we have to have left or right? Like, the truth is always in the middle, is what I've learned as I got older. Everything. There's good points on both sides. So the truth is the middle. Sorry, man, I'm taking this too far. But yeah, it pisses me the fuck off. It pisses me off. And I feel, I honestly, I genuinely respect everything that you and all of your peers do, bro. Like, I think it's incredible. And it hurts me to know that you have to deal with this bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't help us as a country. And as, you know, and you see now everyone getting all patriotic and shit, which is great. But I like it. How long is it going to last? Like, how long are you going to buy Canadian for, bro? Like, how long? We go to our local butcher, our local fish shop, like our local cafes. We put all of our money into local businesses, aside from when we visit the States and go there. But even when we go to the States, we invest in local businesses too. If I'm traveling, I'm not going to Walmart and shit. Like, I go to Trader Joe's, but that's a bit different because it's like the best. But you know, anyway, sorry, I'm ranting. Keep going. Go, jump in.
No. I mean, again, I think there's a difference between regulation and employees, because I mean, you know, government, like the actual people there, because I mean, usually the people there are
enforcing the rules,
enforcing the laws. Yeah, and the real issue you got to deal with is the laws.
That's a fair point. That's a fair.
You know what I mean? But either way, you know, like I agree, like red tape. I mean, I feel like to be honest, like I think that the government's tried to do that. It's just Canada has a lot of it. And they're not wild like what's going on in the US right now, where they're just like, you know, cut it all. Figure it out. Yeah, you know, we'll figure it out later. So I think that there's an element of that. I hope that it continues to get better. But yeah, I think, like, you know, going back to what, you know, you had mentioned, like the intent behind what we were like talking about the whole, why our biggest conversation about this when everything was going down was like this level of patriotism. It was this buy local mentality. And what I was like telling you is like, you know, I really like hope that we can keep that, you know, like it's always said in a different context, but keep that same energy, right? Like, I think that the issue that that I think is like, you know, I think people really need to understand. I always say this: buy local has a lot of time has this context of it's more expensive, right? Like, I mean, it's like a convenience store mentality. Yeah, it's easier to go to a convenience store. It's just more expensive, but buy local doesn't necessarily have to mean more expensive. Like, especially like we try to keep our kind of beer, like our beers they're not bucket beer beers, but we try to focus on making sure that they're as affordable, like reasonably affordable, and not necessarily at domestic prices, but close to it enough where it wouldn't be price alone that's going to drive you away from the purchase. And I think that to some extent has had an influence on why craft beer hasn't grown as much as it has, because for a lot of people it's expensive. And then also and I think that the element of Canadian pride and that buy local, I really feel like it needs to stay. And I was like, I mean, you're a hip hop guy. Like we were chatting about this earlier, where I had this analogy. Like when I was growing up, there was a lot of, Maestro Fresh was there. There's a few Canadian rappers, but Canadian rappers always had this like, but they're not as good as the US rappers. It's like, there's
sure.
Chocolate, Cardinal, Rascals. I mean, I'm dating myself a little bit, but like all these Canadian rap artists, and I thought they were great. I still have them on my Spotify. Like, but there was this I think there's more broad perception but they just weren't as talented, or they would never be at the level of Jay-Z or Biggie or Tupac or whoever, right? And then Drake came along. And then Drake was like, all of a sudden, like you have, Tory Lanez, although he's in jail or whatever. Like, but you know what I mean? Like you have more successful Canadian artists, Weekend, whatever. Like, and now people are like, wait a minute. Like Canadian artists could be at the peak of, the entertainment industry across the globe. Forget about Canada. So there was a bit of a mind shift, and for what it's worth, and all the negativity and the insults and the anger that everyone's feeling towards Trump, maybe the good out of this is this element of being pro Canadian and pro local business, and like make it continue, right? If that continues, that's going to help a ton of businesses across the board. And I think that like the good that can come out of that. Now, if we're in a trade with the US, that's going to be awful, like overall for the economy. But at least there's a silver lining that would say, that there can be elements of good that come out of bad. And I think that this is an area where I think that people need to understand more of why buy local matters. It's not just because you buy local for the sake of local. You buy local because the product the product still has to be great, but they are. There's tons of great craft beer in Ontario. What you're doing is like working on your local supply chain. It's employment locally. It's and it's reliability. Case in point, LCBO strike, or when that happened, you had to pivot to local producers because there wasn't a lot of options. And unfortunately that was a domestic issue, and it was unfortunate on both sides. Like the LCBO workers had like real concerns that I think that needed to be addressed, and vice versa. The government was kind of whatever was going on with their negotiation, but either way, like that shifted to, hey, like work with local producers to get you through this period of instability. This is another example of, instability, and obviously like a bit of a brand perception in America, but local producers will always be there. I mean, they'll always be there as long as they're in business. And the second, and if things kind of continue to go the way that, if the industry's contracting, costs are going up, and there's no support from consumers, those businesses are just going to go away. And then you're going to be left with, potentially like a scenario where you're just dealing with the largest brands, macro brands, foreign brands, and you don't have that local community or local support. So I think that my one major, when we were chatting in the end, I see a lot of this local love. I really hope that, people really think about it a little bit more about, why they buy the things that they buy, and are there local alternatives, and can they continue to buy those local alternatives? Forget about beer. Like, you can even think about ketchup, right? I think it's the French ketchup.
Yep.
I don't buy the ketchup usually, but meaning like, if there is a local option and the local option is 5 cents more on a $5, bottle of ketchup, that inflation you can live with, even if it was, and a lot of the time it's actually the same price. Argument, for argument's sake, it's just maybe like a lesser known brand, but maybe make it a better known brand, right? Like, the ability for all of these small businesses to grow and to get to that next level is going to be predicated on consumers, willingness to adopt change. And clearly in craft beer in Ontario, the issue is not necessarily, there's lots of great breweries. I think people have an amazing selection. Like, you can support whatever brewery you want, but at the end of the day, the market share question, the market share disparity with the US is still what it is. It's significant. So everyone wins if that market share can grow. I mean, that's my biggest theme every time we talk, or all these podcasts. I'm like, hey, the objective needs to be to grow that share. Everyone will win. And what I see more broadly is, and I think that there's industry stress. There's industry stress across the board, but I think there's like there seems to be a real competitive focus within the brewing space, like breweries fighting against breweries. And then there's, I think to some extent, like within an industry perspective, like a negative focus within the blogging space. And I think those two things really hurt when it comes to like making everyone win. Like one example that I recently saw was, when all of this was happening, there was, on one of the Facebook posts, there was a brewery that was talking about their beer, and that it was an Ontario made beer. I mean, all Ontario craft beer is made with craft beer. I think this beer was made with 100% Ontario ingredients. So I think hops, yeast, malt, whatever. I mean, something like that. And then, so that brewery was promoting this beer. Another brewery on the same thread said, hey, that's amazing. Congrats. Here's our beer. Would love to get some love. I'm obviously paraphrasing this, discussion.
Okay.
And
where was this? Was this on Facebook, Instagram? Facebook.
I have some group. I forget which one, but
a Facebook group. Oh, the Canadian craft beer ones.
No. I don't think it was. No. I don't know if it was a beer. Whatever. It's some Facebook. There's a million.
You know what? There is those ones. Tiff was telling me today that there was one that she joined at 40K. It was about buy Canadian. Now it's like 700,000 members about like buying Canadian. So it could have even been something like that. Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is like, you have that conversation, or sorry, that's the post. But then the person that, posted the original this original post comments to the person that said, hey, that's amazing. So here's another beer for my brewery. Like, would love to get the support as well. Kind of saying like, hey, great. That's awesome. But just so you know, just to be clear, your beer is different than ours because ours is actually 100% Canadian. Ontario made. So, It's just like, you don't need to do that, right? Like,
no,
it's great. That just seems real petty. No matter, like, again, it goes back to like, I don't think necessarily ill intention, but this is the kind of like, sneak diss kind of weird stuff that I see in the industry that I'm like, it's got to stop. It's not helping. And I think most brewers would say, most people aren't happy with the state of the industry in today. And this is the kind of behavior that I think, makes people look at the industry in a weird way, where it doesn't seem to be like a winning industry. It seems like a real cutthroat, unfriendly, I want to say non-inclusive. I don't mean this in a diversity way. I mean like a non-inclusive in an industry way. Mentality where everyone's in this to win. Like, it's not a big deal if your beer is more Ontario than my beer. It's a ridiculous argument. We're from Ontario. We're trying to sell beer. It's great. Like, it is what it is. And then on the blogging side too, as I mentioned to you before, like, you know, we'll see these blogging posts of people. The most recent one was, you know, someone like eviscerating
Who
Ontario.
we won't name them.
You know, eviscerating Ontario loggers. And the irony of this post, I think it was maybe a month ago, saying, you know, Ontario loggers are inconsistent and crap. There's a few good ones, but, you know, I'd rather drink a Miller High Life, which is funny now given what is going on.
All the context.
Yeah, with the context. But it's like, was that necessary? You know, did the clicks really make you feel better? You know, I mean, and are those comments from the same guys that comment on the same post constantly that great? Because all that does is, like, the average person will see that, and it's just petty and useless. I mean, and it may be true. And I'm not saying that. I mean, brands are not above criticism, and people can be criticized all the time. And maybe Ontario loggers are crap, and maybe whatever. But this is a time where you realize, it's one thing, right? I'd say this. If you think about it more broadly, it's one thing if, you know, you're sitting on, like, let's just hypothetically say we're in a world where we have 100 Canadian companies, and those companies are all the size of Apple, and they make different iPhones. And this is a stupid example, but I'm giving you an example of, like, successful, rich, huge companies, and every phone has features that are different. And you have guys chirping like, "Hey, that phone's shit," or "This is crap, that color is stupid," whatever. Those companies are successful, and everything is great about what's going on in this entire ecosystem. Whereas you have people, some of these blogs that are shitting on and trashing small businesses that aren't doing well. Fuck you. Sorry. Like, I'm not, like, I don't have, like, you know, say it to my face. I mean, and this is not, just to be clear, this is not said to me, but this is being said, you know, across a variety of Reddits, blogs. You know, I mean, you know a lot of the same people in these industries. Like, you don't need to do it. Didn't you? Like, my mom said, if you have something nice to say, say it. If you don't fucking say it. You don't need to. That's a Canadian way, right? And at the end of the day, I really think that this is not helping. It didn't help before. It didn't help 5 years ago. It didn't help 3 years ago. It didn't help 1 year ago. And it sure as shit doesn't help now. So I'm very much of this mindset that I hope this is a reset for a lot of these guys. And I mean, I'm saying guys, I mean, a lot of these people, you know more. And again, this is not male or female. I'm just saying in general, I think it's like people just need to understand everyone's here to put food on the table for their families, hopefully make great products and have people buy them. And that's it. And you don't need to add in a, like, unhelpful context to an industry that's not necessarily doing the best. And I think that, especially in this context of proud Canadian, buy local, support your local businesses, support your local economy, I shouldn't have to tell you that. I mean, this isn't a lecture, but you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, I think the angle here is, you know, smarten up a little bit. If for people that have been involved in the industry, either directly or indirectly, that, you know, have been, you know, perhaps less supportive of other people in the same, you know, in the same industry, essentially.
I love that. Honestly, that was a great rant. Well done. That was fucking awesome. I couldn't agree more, dude. There's not, like, fuck. Without going too deep into it, because I know we're not trying to, like, call names or that, but, like, you know, there's been definitely a bit of a plague of people who are a net negative about breweries and stuff. And look, we all have opinions, and palates are inherently subjective, bro. Like, I haven't even told you about all the beef we had recently with some fucking dudes who had a problem. I'll say this on here as well. It's fine. With, like, our top 10 in Quebec recently, and a little touch of the top 10 in Ontario. The Ontario one was actually surprisingly, people were cool, but the Quebec one, people had some problems because their favorite brewery wasn't included. And the thing is that, like, we didn't exclude anybody for any reason. It's like if you don't, there's like 300 something breweries in Quebec. There's 400 something breweries in Ontario. I go to Buffalo once a month. I'm in America for fucking 6 weeks right now. We spend a lot of the summer here. Like, what do you want me to do? I can't drink everything. So therefore, if I don't drink the beer from your favorite brewery, it might not make my fucking list, bro. And these people made a huge big deal out of it. And it turned it into a whole negative thing. And I'm like, this is supposed to be our week where we celebrate craft beer by doing an Ontario top 10 and the Quebec top 10. And then some pricks went and fucking tried to ruin it. That shit pissed me off. Just like what you're saying. If someone's here shitting on beer, like, bro, like, if we don't like the beer, we don't talk about it. Right. And if we don't talk about it, it doesn't mean we don't like it as well at the same token. And if we don't like it, who fucking cares? If you like it, then hell yeah. If you're a local brewery, that's what you want to support that. But we would never in this platform stand for shitting on anybody, because the people who are making beers, do you know what's funny, bro? The people who are talking all this shit, they haven't done anything. You are sitting there, you're putting your money up, you have a physical bricks and mortar place. You were contracting before that at a higher level than anybody, and everybody who always were talking about contracting mentioned fucking Lost Craft to me every time, because no one was beating you. Like, the fuck out of here, bro. The people who are talking shit haven't done anything, and that's how it always goes. So, like, I agree with you. It doesn't push anything forward. So I hope those people eventually disappear, because that's a net negative, and ain't nobody got time for anything negative. So yes, well said. Absolutely. I'm 100% about that. And we do not support anything negative here as well. And it's all about positive stuff. And it's not about like kissing ass and telling everyone they're good when they're not good, but it's, you know what? At least people are trying, like the people who are usually talking shit are the ones that aren't doing anything. So like, nobody has any real right to talk any shit about anybody, particularly now more than ever. Like now, not even talk about the tariffs. I'm talking just like in the rough economic times that we're in. Like nobody has it. Just support your local, bro. Like, yeah, you're right. Beer, support them. Your favorite bar, your favorite restaurant, your favorite butcher, your favorite vegan shop, your favorite fish store. Like, we talked about this all the time, but Tiff and I know all of the people, all of our local cafes and our butcher and our fish person. We had to physically go in there and tell them all that we're going away for like 6 weeks, so that they don't think that we don't support them anymore. Like, hey guys, we're going to be here. I know they all follow us on social and we follow them, but like, that's how much of a relationship we have with our local businesses, because we've invested in Hamilton. We own property in Hamilton. I want to see the city thrive and succeed. And we put our money into our local businesses and into the local breweries. I'll go around, we'll visit all the breweries, and we'll spend money. We'll buy the beer and the food and the wine and enjoy the experience. And I really hope that, like you were saying, that this will last this time, because like, I guess, the LCBO strike didn't particularly last. And then during COVID, it kind of lasted, but not really. So I'm, like, I don't know how like optimistic I am that people will change their buying habits, but I really hope that maybe it puts some perspective. And I don't want to shit on Americans, because I feel like Americans should support their local businesses as well. Like wherever you're at, go to your local breweries and bars and stores and just support the businesses that you want to see thrive. Like, for example, the last episode before this was with Chris of Durand Cafe, which I've told you about in Hamilton, and Mark of Sidewalk Cafe in Waterloo. I go to Durand every week because he gets all the beers. And if I buy from him, that's essentially directly supporting the breweries, because he's going and get them. Because if I want to get those beers, I got to either drive to all of them or order from all of them, and I'm either going to pay shipping or I got to buy 4 of them. But if I can go to him, I'll pay a premium, but I'll buy one. Cool with me, because I'm going to buy a coffee as well, and everything's blessed. That's supporting local business to me, and I think that's just, it's beautiful. Truly, it really is, and it's such an important thing. Like, I get all of Nate's beers, who's in Ottawa, I'll get them for him, and I'll ship them out to him. So it's, and then we're supporting the shippers, the freight we were talking about before. So yeah, it's this whole ecosystem. I really hope that people start to understand a bit more about the importance of ecosystems. This conversation has like painted that picture a bit more about how fragile it is. Isn't it really? I think that's kind of the key. It's this fragility about everything. The electricity's on, the water's on, the heat's on. Like, all of this could fall apart like fucking that, bro. One little natural disaster is a wrap for everybody. Like, we have to sort of, be aware of like how crazy that is, and how much everyone's just like making shit work in this crazy, crazy time. You guys more than anybody. The brewers are just like a fucking making it happen, bro. Like, and all it is just costs going up and up and up, and then drinkers going down, and then barriers to selling stuff. You can't sell to another province. And like you said, we mentioned before that blew my mind a little bit, like the interprovincial, like the local barriers as far as the different stores and the rules around it. And it's just you're fighting every day for survival and to make it happen. And it's just like you guys should just be fucking, you guys should have a parade. It's
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're just selling beer. We're not,
well,
you know, we're not.
but you're entrepreneurs and you're employing.
Yeah. You know,
But you know what I mean? You're hiring the community. You're a
yeah,
community
yeah. I mean, well,
hub.
no, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean,
I know
look,
it's not, you know, Sophie cancer, but you
yeah,
know what I'm saying. I'm being,
no,
I'm being
no,
a bit dramatic.
obviously, I'm being facetious, but no, I mean, I think more broadly, the bigger, the bigger takeaway is kind of, I think, and this goes back to like the key message with, with respect to the tariffs and the sentiment and the Canadian pride and the buy local mentality and where this drives to. It's like, Ontario wins when Ontario businesses win, and Canada wins when Canadian businesses win.
Facts.
And I think that the mechanisms to get there, and whether it's on the consumer side, whether it's like on our industry side, whether it's on a regulation side or a regulatory side with our provinces, tax relief is great. Again, it's complicated because tax relief means less money to the government for services. So I mean, there's a bit of a dichotomy, and there's a bit of a mosaic in terms of all of these different things. But I think that certainly craft, a lot of industries would suffer under what Trump has done or what he's planning to do or what he may do, right? Craft beer is one of those industries that's hasn't had an easy time for the last few years, for sure, through COVID, through all the inflation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's an industry that's poised to succeed, I think, in a unique way, right? Whereas auto production right now is has a big problem with all this tariff stuff going on. And not that tariffs are insulate, not that tariffs wouldn't hurt us, but at the end of the day, people speak with their wallets, and people will, if the consumer demand is there, then there'll be, where there's a will, there's a way, and people will figure it out. So I just think that, that aspect of the thought process with the consumer and the buy local and kind of really think about why you support the businesses that you support is relevant. Like, the import brand that you buy, at the beer store doesn't care about you, so when you develop those relationships with your community and your craft brewery, like, that matters, and people care. You do a whole, like, and we do this all the time. Someone has a party, they put a home delivery order late, they call the brewery, they figure it out, someone drives that thing down to you, right? Like, it's just that element of, it's a community oriented business. It's not like craft breweries, while we would love them to be like super scalable, they're kind of designed to be very strong in their local community. Like, if you don't own your own backyard, how can you expect to own another province? So you have to be, pretty focused and strong in where you are. And that's how you can get there. So hopefully with all this I think with everything that's going on externally, I hope it amplifies that, buy Canadian sentiment internally where it makes sense. And I think beer is certainly something where it makes sense. Why would you, like, there's no reason to buy beer brewed anywhere else outside of Canada when you have such great Canadian beer.
What a fucking way to wrap this up. That's beautiful, dude. Well said, man. I couldn't agree more. I really feel like this has been like, I feel like I've learned a lot during this, and obviously we're both being a bit opinionated and had a few little rants, and this is kind of part of the fun of this this thing here. And whether people agree or not, I feel like it's a fun discourse, and I feel like you nailed it, man. And thank you so much for bringing this to me and for taking the time and for saying all of this stuff. I think it's like, it's really pertinent. It's really important that we're doing this at this particular time now, even though the tariffs have been paused. Like, who knows what's going to happen in 29 days or whatever it is. It's, you nailed it. Support your businesses that you love. Support craft breweries if that's your thing. local. It just really feels like the future is local. The future is going to be local, and with the ability to go wider if you want. That's what it feels like to me, and I kind of feel like that's what you've been saying. It's like focus on local, which is very similar to music, which was the parallel you brought up earlier as well. And also that it'd be great if all of that red tape was removed, and that if you wanted to be a national brand or to at least service individual customers across the country, you should be able to do that with no restriction, and to make those customers happy. And on top of that, the other thing that I think people forget is that encourages tourism, because beer is very big on tourism. There are a lot of people, very much including myself, and I know you too, go to places for beer all the time. Every single place that we go here, you should see my fucking iPhone notes. Like, they're crazy about the way that I map everything out about, where I go. The way that we went to come down here to Florida was absolutely dictated by craft beer. Even the stop offs along the way, like to Philly, we're going to Raleigh because there's 2 breweries I wanted to go to there. And on the way, we went through Richmond, Virginia, because we have a friend who works at one of my favorite breweries. So we went there and I picked up a case of brew. We got to hang out with him and have some beers. And, all of that is dictated by that. And that's spend. That's money. And if I'm going to a particular city, if people are living in Toronto and they hear the Montreal craft beer is killer, they're going to go to Montreal for a weekend, and they're going to go to a bunch of killer places. And maybe they'll be like, oh, Quebec City's only like 2 hours and 45 minutes away, so let's dip down there. And it's and vice versa. People from Quebec come down to Montreal, to Toronto, and be like, yo, what's going on? Let's go to this High Park place. I heard it was sick. Like, beer encourages tourism. Tourism is other dollars. Tourism is so much more. It's hotel dollars. It's gas station dollars. It's food dollars. It's so much. There's so much that goes into it all. And it's just like, I don't know. Yeah. You really nailed it, man. We just need to support our own. Everywhere needs to support their own. For our American friends, for Canadians, support each other when we're traveling and stuff. But I guess, like you said, craft beer was built to be local. I think that's such a fantastic message, that's where it is. Anything that tries to go beyond that is cool, and there's some that'll definitely work out, but inherently that's really the future of craft beer at this point. And I think you captured that perfectly, brother. I love it. Was there anything else that we wanted to make sure that we got in?
No, maybe like for the title of the pod, you might want to say like fast forward like 2 hours in to talk about beer, because I think we talked about politics
for a long time. Well, I feel like I could put that in the description. I feel like it was good to cover it all, though. Like, yeah. I had some questions as maybe a bit of a noob to this, so I feel like you answered, and like you said, you admitted where there were parts where you weren't 100% sure. So I'm sure there's folks in the comments that can, fill in the gaps, pause. But we also had our opinions on stuff, and our opinions are our opinions. Just like people got mad at us for not having their favorite brewery on our fucking list, then maybe they'll be not happy with the opinions on stuff, but that's okay. Let us know your opinions if you think that we're wrong or could think differently. It's okay, because it's a discussion. All of this is a discussion. At the end of the day, though, we all have to remember that we're all humans, and we all want the same outcome. We want craft. If you're listening to this podcast, you're a craft beer nerd. You have to kind of be, or you're in the industry, and you want craft beer to win. That's really at the end of the day. And if you got to keep that in mind, that if you're hearing opinions from people, from either of us or for anybody else, that ultimately I would hope that you would you remember that people just want craft beer to win, and that can look like that can look differently for different people. But I feel like we really shed some light on this, and we really got like an emergency kind of like podcast out of in here that summarized what's going on. I guess to wrap this up, what I you might have said this already, but was there like, what would you say to people who are like, all right, well, what do I do now? What do I do now? Whatever going to happen, we have less than a month until the next decision's made. What should I do in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously like the application we're talking about is beverages or beer, but certainly like a focus on buy local is to me, you speak with your wallet. I think that over the next month, what I suspect is going to happen is that a lot of American brands, whether they're produced in, again, the devil is in the details sometimes, like where things are produced they're an American brand produced here, or they're actually produced in America and imported in. Like there's a lot of context behind it. But I'd say that, certainly speak with your wallet. If you're happy with, if obviously, speak with your patriotism, if that's what matters. And I'm pretty confident that, when some iconic American brands that sell a lot in Canada get a month of sales that's way down, they're going to contact that, their politician or their contact or their bureaucrat or their lobbyist, whoever it is, and be like, hey, no, we're not doing this anymore. That. Yeah, fix that. Exactly. Right. I mean, legitimately. And I think that, that's probably the best thing that Canadian this isn't even necessarily about buying our beer or anyone's beer, frankly. It's more about across the board, buy Canadian and, avoid American, and kind of speak with your wallets about how happy you are about, what's been happening. And I'm pretty sure that's going to send a message. I think it's already sent a message, to be honest.
I think so too. That LCBO move was kind of to be honest, like the LCBO deciding to like just pull. Did they do it on their own, or were they advised to do that?
Doug Ford, I think, said to pull everything.
Okay, like as much as it was what?
It was, yeah, I think it came from the province.
Came from the province. Okay, well, look, I don't fuck with really anybody once again, but I thought that was kind of gangster. I was like, oh, that's a pretty sick counter move to be like, all right. Cool. LCBO, biggest purchase of alcohol in the world. Suck my fucking dick, bro. I'm gonna take all your shit off the shelf. Like, I thought that was solid. That was a solid, like, all right, you think we're pussy? Okay, cool. Watch. I feel like that was kind of cool. And whilst I don't like the antagonism, I don't think it's healthy. But it was more like, oh, if you're gonna come at me with aggression, well, then I gotta come back at you with the same energy. And I thought that was pretty sweet. As much as I don't like it, but yeah. You're right. Buy that, send the message. And look, if you're American watching or listening, do the same shit. Like, it's not quite going to have the same impact as we sort of dictated here, because we have much more American products in Canada than you guys have Canadian products down here. But it might help as well. And just, at the very least, instead of buying the, large multinationals, go to your local. Wherever you are, go to your local. If you're in Australia, if you're in Europe, go to your local. It doesn't matter. If you're in Africa, if you're in Asia, go to your local. Don't buy the big guys for a little bit and see what's popping and see what happens with that money. And hopefully it's a net positive, because it's keeping money in your community, and more people in your community are doing better. There's more jobs, there's more money circulating, there's more money going back into other small businesses. When at the end of the day, what we learned during COVID is small businesses are the hub of any community. And when our main streets have half the stores with newspaper on the windows, it's not good. It's not good for anybody. And it's not really what we want. And we want businesses to thrive, because that's what it's all fucking about, is going in there and saying hi and be like, I know the dude who's my butcher. We went and dropped him off. Tiff went and dropped him off a 4-pack of Quebec beer, because he's talking about he loves beer. So we went and dropped him off some stuff, and he was stoked. I'm like, because we fuck with you. And he hooks us up, and he gives us the best cuts, and like does the meat for our dog. Like, we cook the food for our dog, and it's like high quality stuff. And I'm like, we value him, and we value the business, and that's what we do. We spend that money there. We could spend so much less if we went to Food Basics, but no, fuck that. We're going to this local dude, because I know that there's multiple people who are supported by that business, multiple local and multiple other sub businesses, and he works with breweries too. He said so. Anyway, trying to just point out that there's a system, and it's like it's one thing and one thing and one, and it just keeps going. And it's you can't forget that right now. And I think it's more important than ever, which you very well explained, man. I appreciate you, man, a lot. This is great.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think tensions are high,
which is unfortunate.
Yeah, like every Canadian's chat group has blown up, over the last, few days. I know this for sure. I think it's, and also it's like, I think that Canadian, that Canadian way is always great. Like, kill them with kindness, and, at the end of the day, but stand up for yourself. And and again, like even like as I said about this, the buy local thing, it's like obviously buy products that you like. I'm pretty confident you can find local products that you like, and I really don't think that they're going to be that much more expensive, generally speaking, than products maybe that you're used to buying. And I think that it's the
That's
best,
a good point.
and it's honestly the best the best defense. This is almost like the best defense is a great offense in this point, from the perspective of it's the most effective thing that every Canadian it's the most effective thing that every Canadian can do that will signal to, the leadership in America that like just don't play this game. It's not a game that's, a winning, a winning formula. And this is not just beer. I mean, just to be clear, like I think it's great. I feel like, part of me, I mean, I don't want to say like the cynic in me feels like there's a bit of an opportunistic mentality to be like, oh, this is great. Like, it's great that Trump did a tariff war. I can promote my business. I mean, and it's true. Like, obviously I want to promote my business, but, I'm not trying to be opportunistic. Like, this would be awful for Canada. Like, people, yeah, buying local is great, but when nobody has jobs, nobody can buy anything. Like, it's not a good, it's not a good this is not good at all, no matter how you slice it. It's more, I think, just a bit of a, a mind shift that hopefully continues. That's all. I think you just think about it. It's not like an end all be all kind of thing for everyone. And you like the brands that you like, and you like your bourbon. Like, it's not, don't, stop drinking bourbon forever. It's more, hey, like, consider adding in some Canadian as well. That's the kind of, I think, mindset and thought process that I think once a little, because Canada's a smaller economy, if a few people make that change and it kind of snowballs, it's going to impact some local businesses in a major way. Like a small change in consumer behavior could be the difference between a brewery staying open or closing.
No, you're so right. And also on the other side, just to sort of echo, because I know we have an American audience, it's the same thing. Like Americans are going to be just as fucked by this as we read out the posts from earlier as well. Like, this is a net negative, the tariffs, for everybody, as far as the impact on jobs, the factors in impact on craft beer specifically, hence what we're talking about tonight. And yeah, hopefully everyone can just go to focusing on local again and just really sticking to it this time, because maybe they tried during COVID and maybe they tried during the LCBO strike, and then you know what, just I don't think anything really beats local. And there are some things that you do have to get that are more national or whatever, but at the end of the day, if you can purchase it locally, it's just if you think that's what humans are made for, the reason why we're all fucked, we move to cities, like we're based as everywhere across the planet are used to what, like tribes of like 100 or so people. So you remember that many people and you know how to behave in that environment. As soon as you're in a city and there's 1 million people, 8 million people, you don't even look at the person in the elevator with you. That's when it gets weird and shit. Like in Montreal and Toronto and any city, it's the same fucking thing. And you got to like remember, like, oh, that's not what we're meant for. We're meant for that one-to-one. We're meant to go like trading and bartering. Like, hey, I grew these carrots. Can I get some of that beef or whatever it is? That's what we're meant for. And it's kind of like keeping that, remembering who we are. And it's cool that we've got civilization and this growth and stuff, which is literally amazing. But also like, remember that sort of neighborhood thing, that the place you can walk to is important. And that like that means a lot as well in craft beer as well. Like, whether it's you're just happy that it's your local, if you go there directly, you're going to go to a store that purchases directly from them, whatever it might be. Just keep that in mind. And at the end of the day, like we've sort of said here, we're all neighbors, man. We're all like family. It's all the same piece of land. It's an imaginary line. Once again, nothing's real. People just need to remember nothing is real, and that line is fake. It's because of fucking wars that line exists. And when we cross over, when you go Nexus and you go over that bridge, and it takes 45 seconds, and it doesn't even feel like you left because they barely ask you any questions. You're like, oh, now I have to change my car to miles, and now it's like, it's all fake. So we're all family. We're all human. Let's just like make this shit work, man. Net positive. Let's fucking go. Let's go.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Takeaway message: we could all be Drake. And secondary takeaway message. secondary takeaway message is, people are going to be looking at those seats for that Kendrick concert this summer. I'll be very interested to see. Buy local. Just remember, guys, buy local.
Are you going? Kendrick and SZA, I think it already sold out.
Yeah.
Wap. You think you got the most Grammys? The most Grammys of any artist and stuff like that? I don't know, man.
I don't know.
You're about to do it at the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is like in a week or some shit.
That stadium better be empty if people want to support local. You got to take it to the next level.
I mean, Drake spent half his time in LA. I don't know about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, sometimes you got to take the L. Sometimes you got to hold the L, and you got to hold that L, and you got to move on, and it's okay. And you got to get less baggy pants because the pants are stupid. Make the pants a little smaller. You know what I'm saying? Nice. And it's okay. Hold the L. Sometimes you got to take an L. Maybe if you're Drake, shouts to Drake, maybe you got to take an L. Maybe you got to hold the L. That's all. And then you move on from there. And just be like, Kendrick, well done. Well done.
Great.
On to the next, you know?
Awesome. Great chat, bro.
I know.
As always.
As always. This is awesome. Once again, stick around. We'll finish this up. Where can everybody find Lost Craft, High Park, online, and in real life? And local spirits.
All of our stuff at our brewery, located west of the junction, and LCBO, grocery stores, beer stores, moving into some other provinces pretty soon, especially with
break down those barriers, bitch. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Help us out. Government, help us out. But yeah, you can find us. Look for us. We're around.
I like that. I love that. Bro, thank you so much for hanging out. This is awesome. Once again, stick around. Hey, dude, no, this is sick, and I really appreciate, honestly, like for real, I appreciate your insight on this stuff. I really feel like you've been like a real asset to the pod with that, like the fact that this keeps coming up, and you thought of me immediately and us immediately to do this here, and I appreciate that a lot, man. For real, you're a champion, and you're such a hardworking dude, and the way you're building your brands is incredibly admirable, and I appreciate you immensely. Like since we've known each other for 10 years, it was the end of 2015, eh?
Yeah,
that we met.
Exactly.
And we started April because we're turning 10 in April. So, you know, we connected from the very beginning. So like, it's been cool to see you grow and just continue to dominate and to innovate and pivot where need be. And it's sick, man. I love seeing it. And I appreciate your insight a lot on this because I know you take the business stuff very seriously. And sometimes craft brewing is an industry where it's fun. It's silly. Not silly. It's fun. And it's like oh man, you know, one day I'd love to open a brewery, you know, type of people who maybe not treat it like a business. And you've always treated it like a business. And I really feel like that's really indicative of your success and stuff. And the way I've heard people talk about Lost Craft was just reverence, particularly like contract breweries coming up. Like you have always been like the goal. And then now even, I think it's even doper because you moved into the spirits world. You got the actual physical space, which is beautiful, and it's so well done. Just man, I'm just congrats on all the success. You're a champion. I appreciate you a lot.
Appreciate it,
man. All right, y'all, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, hit that notification bell so you know when the new drops. Follow us everywhere at BAOS Podcast. Check out the long form audio everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you know the fucking vibes. Check out Shehan. Go follow Lost Craft, High Park, local spirits everywhere. Check them out, and most importantly, support local. If you're in Canada, support local. If you're in America, support local. If you're in Australia, if you're in Europe, if you're in Africa, if you're in Asia, support local. Get it done, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out.